of Energy, now he's on the health. And I'm thanks on behalf of you, Mr. Zaigulia, because he'll take over a very heavy burden of the first committee on this, during this annual session. I would also like to draw your attention to the fact that the OSCE PA Special Representative for Gender Issues, well-known Ms. Hedi Fry, is also unable to be with us this year. I would like to thank Vice President Balburga Habsburg-Douglas for kindly accepting to act on Mr. Fry's behalf while in Baku, presenting the gender report and co-chairing the traditional gender lunch. Thanks to Balburga, long-lasting Vice President of this Parliamentary Assembly, and now she is again ready to take over additional burden on her shoulder. Second topic is report of the President of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. You got my annual report in the written form, as I have done it in the Vienna. Now I have done it for 1 year. I believe it is good to make this type of summary of our work and our accountability for our work like leaders of Parliamentary Assembly. It was a year between Istanbul and Baku. And I believe that we have shown our comparative advantages like OSCE PA and like inside OSCE family. I believe that we tried through the collective efforts to establish a year of the hard work rather than a year of our primary hard words. And I believe that we'll continue together to work on that. I have given you few promises a year ago. My first idea, my first duty was to try to make cohesion inside the OSCE family. As you know, election observation mission has been our main activities, and we needed to close the unproductive misunderstanding with others. And we have done it. You got the letter of the former director for ODIHR that we are now cooperating well. Our delegations, our special coordinators, our head of delegations are now much more satisfied with this cooperation. And I believe we have done a lot for all capacity for OSCE family. As you know, we continue to work together with the other elements in our OSCE family, with the executives, with the Secretary General, and normally to show them that Parliamentary Assembly is the source of the legitimacy of all organizations. Due to we are elected politicians, we are representative of the people, and we are the source of every parliamentary democracy. Based on that, we established the new lines of cooperation, or refreshed some of them, with the other parliamentary organizations and international organizations. Very important step forward was beginning of cooperation or beginning of the work together with the United Nations. Secretary General Ban Ki-moon started that new page in our relationship, and his representative will be together with us. With the Council of Europe, with the President of Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe, with the Secretary General, we started cooperation. I have been there with Vice Presidents, and what was one of my priorities, to include in the leading of organization all the top officials of OSCE PA, Vice Presidents, chairpersons, vice chairs, rapporteurs, because we need more collective efforts, we need more collective minds, and we need more decision-making political process inside OSCE PA. And I believe we have been successful in that work. We started consultation, regular consultation with the vice presidents in Budva, in Vienna, now in the Baku. We started first time meetings between 3 our chairpersons for committees and 3 persons chair of committee of executives of permanent council. What is new chance to try to give the new power, new strength to our resolutions and to our conclusions, to try to get in follow-up more implementations of our statements. And what is concretely important during the Ukrainian crisis. Luckily, we closed some kind of the misunderstanding before the Ukrainian crisis started in full shape. Based on the initiative of Vice President Doris Barnett, I visited Moscow and Kiev in the middle of the crisis to connect our colleagues, to connect their parliaments. And after a short visit, 24 hours, head of the Russian Duma, Council of Federation, and the President of Verkhovna Rada, I had the privilege to have meetings with President Narishkin, President Matvienko, and President Turchinov, and in the same time he was acting president of the Ukraine. And just after 10 days, we organized a meeting between our two delegations in Vienna. It was the sign how parliamentary diplomacy, how we could help to de-escalate situation, to send a sign that we are capable to communicate, that we are capable to face on with the very, very hard issues and very hard emotions in that moment. And that was the sign that parliamentary diplomacy could be effective, sometimes not less than traditional diplomacy. And the Parliamentary Assembly of OSCE has capacities, personal, collective, administrative, to face on with that type of the challenges. I truly believe that we are just on the beginning in the year where we have to think about Helsinki Plus 40 process. As you know, I promised and we started to preparing 3 seminars related with our cooperation with the NGO sectors, think tank organizations, to try to prepare our full equipped documents for the Helsinki Plus 40 process. It is the way to connect us with NGOs, in the same time to get opinion in all sides of our organization, in DC, in Moscow, in Stockholm, like good base for our thinking and for our conclusions about Helsinki Plus 40. Additionally, just last month, I visited France, Germany, and Denmark shortly, our secretariat. We have very present on the east of organization due to our programs, due to our activities, due to our field missions. Now we have to, I have done it, to be more visible on the western side of our organization, more visible, and to try to stimulate our colleagues in the parliaments to backing us. I had the privilege that I had 28 meetings with the heads of the parliaments, states, prime ministers, minister of foreign affairs in abroad. You will find on the list all those countries, all our dear colleagues, and our, I believe, successful work in promotion and better support of OSCE PA. I send the letters, all the presidents of the parliament, to support your activities, to give you much more financial resources for your activities, because now they can see easier that OSCE PA especially, is an inevitable part of the peace, stability, and cooperation on the European soil in OSCE region. And I hope so that together we work in this very challenging year to try to prepare our Helsinki Plus 40 process on the right way. Dear friends, the significant progress we have made, I'm truly aware that we'll continue to work together and to affirmate parliaments and parliamentary assembly like collective message of all of us. Thank you very much. All the other days you have the report. Now the floor is open for the questions and comments. Lord Bones, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. President, for your report. I wonder whether you could take the opportunity in the standing committee when we are here as leaders of delegations and able to ask some questions as to whether you could expand a bit about the program of seminars which you had planned, one of which of course has already had to be postponed. And I wonder whether we can know at what stage, as a standing committee, we are going to make an input into the conclusions which will eventually emerge next year.
Yeah, I hope that we'll start our seminars. It was some kind of the expectation for the probably second round in the Ukraine, and we'll start on 25th September. Now this time in Moscow, but as you know, I have been 2 times United States of America. I visited GMF for the fundraising for the seminar in US, and we found the money for this seminar, and it will be done. But related with the possibility to have second round in Ukraine, it was postponed. Okay, now it's happened. Now we are going to the second in Moscow, and later on will be in the United States of America during this year. I'm very happy because we started, and we have additional extra budgetary and cooperation with General Marshall Fund, very important NGO organization in US. Now in Moscow, we are working with the Institute for Foreign Affairs, and it will be, I'm sure, additional support for our work. Please, Vilja.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your report and for all your activities. My question is about concrete matter. At the end of May, Nordic-Baltic delegations of our Assembly gathering in Riga, and we have sent to you a letter and asked for the possibility to meet Mr. Nikolai Kovalov, your special representative on anti-terrorism, during this session. I think there are a lot of things to talk with him, especially about the situation in the eastern part of Ukraine, where militants with no signs, militants and which maybe could be described as terrorists, still are very active and create troubles for the people. But we didn't get your answer. You haven't responded to our letter. Maybe now you can tell us, will it be possibility for Nordic-Baltic delegations to have this meeting with Mr. Nikolai Kovalov or not? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vilja. I have this letter with your name, and I send you the letter. And Nikolai sent the letter on 24 June, and Secretariat delivered you this letter this morning. I just got information. But he responded on 24 June on my request and your request. And now you have, I believe, his answer on your mails. Yeah. He responded on 24 June. Nikolai sent the letter, and I have the letter. Unfortunately, some kind of mistakes in administration, but you will get answer. Please. Is it okay? Sorry, we missed a few days, but now you have answer. Unfortunately, Nikolai is not with us. He is not a part of Russian delegation on this meeting, and he could not get you the direct answer, but he sent a letter. I have that letter. Alain Nery, please, Alain.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Tout d'abord, je voudrais dire que dans cette période d'instabilité qui secoue le monde et plus particulièrement l'espace OSCE, je me félicite du rôle important joué par l'OSCE globalement et par l'Assemblée parlementaire notamment. Je me félicite des propos que vous avez tenus quant à la légitimité de l'Assemblée parlementaire de l'OSCE. Effectivement, nous sommes très attachés, je crois, les uns et les autres, au rôle essentiel des parlementaires dans une assemblée parlementaire. Ça nous semble la moindre des choses, car les parlementaires ont une légitimité que personne ne peut contester, c'est l'onction du suffrage universel. Et le suffrage universel, dans les démocraties, dans ceux qui respectent les droits de l'homme et du citoyen, la légitimité du suffrage universel est quelque chose qui est au-dessus de tout. Et c'est pourquoi je me réjouis que l'Assemblée parlementaire de l'OSCE prévoit de renforcer le rôle joué par le parlementaire et qu'il y ait une plus grande cohésion entre l'exécutif de notre Assemblée et les parlementaires. À ce propos, je voudrais dire que je me pose quelques questions sur l'organisation et le fonctionnement d'Helsinki plus 40. Nous avons posé à plusieurs reprises des questions quant à la tenue des séminaires, quant à la participation des parlementaires à ces séminaires. Et pour le moment, nous n'avons pas eu de réponse précise à nos questions. Donc ma question est très précise, Monsieur le Président. Vous avez été amené à annuler Washington pour des raisons de date électorale et de résultats électoraux en Ukraine. Ma question pour le 25 septembre à Moscou est de savoir comment vous souhaitez organiser la participation des parlementaires et des vice-présidents à cette organisation de séminaire à Moscou le 25 septembre. Est-ce qu'il y aura une participation des parlementaires, du vice-président, ou est-ce que ce sera uniquement une participation de l'administration de notre organisation? Voilà ma question pour le moment et j'attends une réponse pour pouvoir peut-être préciser les choses.
Waiting really for a response before I can take that matter any further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. Yes, as you know, it's my child, those seminars, and I appointed a team to manage with that, to lead all those 3 seminars. As I truly believe that we have to share our work, teamwork, and to have collective efforts to do more than just one president or one vice president. Normally, it is inevitable to have vice presidents on this type of the meeting. And as I promised during the Bureau meeting in Copenhagen, it will be done. I encourage the others to lead the activities, but now in the new position, I'll do my best to be more devoted for the seminars and to take our personal activities in leadership of those activities. I was devoted to try to do the other things, but now after cancelled the Washington DC without enough consultations, now I'll be we have to be more focused on that, and I'll be personally more focused on that. I will return part of my duty, and I'll personally manage that because I spent a lot of time to initiate that, and after that I would like to give the right shape and right outcome of those activities. Vice President has to be on all 3 meetings because we need legitimacy of Parliamentary Assembly, leadership of Parliamentary Assembly. We need open discussion with all NGOs and all the other prominent participants because we need to exchange opinions, to get new ideas, and to try to get synergy in our activities, in our thoughts, in advance or facing on with the Helsinki Plus 40 challenges. Anybody else? Mr. Campagna, please.
Grazie.
Thank you very
Signor
much.
Presidente,
Mr.
in
President,
apertura dei nostri lavori
in
è stato
beginning our
ricordato
work,
da lei che l'amico Voridis è diventato ministro in Grecia e per cui nella prima commissione affari politici l'Assemblea procederà senza l'amico Voridis. Ma l'amico Voridis aveva anche un incarico molto importante in seno alla nostra Assemblea, come rappresentante speciale sulle questioni della migrazione, che sono delle questioni, ne abbiamo parlato proprio in Montenegro e noi italiani in quei giorni siamo molto grati della solidarietà dell'Assemblea dell'OSCE. Sono questioni molto importanti, forse drammatiche, che riguardano proprio sicurezza e cooperazione e quel ruolo di ponte in materia di human rights fra la nostra organizzazione, fra le Nazioni Unite, fra l'Unione Europea. Quindi la delegazione italiana si permette di sollecitare la necessità che fra la nostra Assemblea di Baku e la prossima Assemblea di Ginevra l'OSCE sostituisca l'amico Voridis augurandogli una buona attività di governo in questo incarico tanto delicato. Grazie, signor Presidente.
I'll try to do it immediately. And I heard the words of Prime Minister Renzi a few days ago that Italy is on the borderline, and tens of thousands of immigrants is coming in Italy, and Italy needs real support of the EU, but real support of all of us to try to help those innocent people. And I believe that we have to help Italy to face on with that, like Parliamentary Assembly. And I'll do my best in the next few days to try to help Italy to face on with that type of the challenges with the full additional signs of support of Parliamentary Assembly, and to open probably that topic during our session in Geneva, our fall meeting in Geneva. George Saratelli, please, Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. President, and it was interesting to listen to your remarks and report, the work you've done during last year, and some of us we participated in the events you counted and presented, and it was important work. I'd like to ask you about particular direction. It's a collaboration with other parliamentary assemblies, which was also an important part of our work and your work personally, to establish better contacts, to improve and strengthen ties with several parliamentary assemblies, which sometimes is essential. It's very important for our work and decisions. And would you please to elaborate a little bit on that issue? What happened significant or important during last year, an improvement of work with the Council of Europe or European Union or NATO Parliamentary Assembly, and what's your impression where we are, and if we need another efforts to improve that relations and to make our work, you know, more coherent and more important with other assemblies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George, for your efforts and your important part of this report. And yes, we have done it with the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe. I met, including the President of the European Parliament. It's our frequent meetings, but this time we are more oriented on Parliamentary Assembly. As you know, we are cooperating closely with them during the election observation missions with all three assemblies, and it was the main part of our work. During my visit to the Venice Commission, I tried to give concrete results, because now we have to base on much more on the common legal standards, on common standards in our behavior, in our procedure, and that's the way how to cooperate with them, to standardize procedure related with democracy, related with the values, and to try to make additional synergy in our work. If you have the same standards, same behaviors related with the issues, face on with the issues like parliamentary assemblies, it will be easier to cooperate. I hope so, especially in the follow-up mechanisms in our parliaments, we have to cooperate. We have enormous number of resolutions which are almost the same. And we have to focus on that, to make analysis. Unfortunately, we have the much more secretariat than they are, but the Secretary General cooperate with the Secretary Generals now with all those assemblies, and we have to work on that way. Normally, the political message is important. Meeting of leadership is important. It is the way to try to find new solutions. On the meeting, as you know, with the Parliamentary Assembly on Council of Europe, we opened one very important agenda: role of the medias in the modern societies. And President Brasseur, Secretary General Jagland agree that we have to open one discussion about it. We need new ideological answers with the basic statement of all sides. We have new power in democracy, media power. Power without legitimacy and sometimes without accountability and responsibility. And I'll try to prepare with them one common conference related with that issue, to try to find the new ideological answers. Obviously, the answers of the Thomas Jefferson's related with the First Amendment, and the others are not quite enough now in the new occasions and the new modern societies. And that's one of the ways to try to cooperate, plus what is, I believe, extremely important, follow-up mechanisms to implement our resolutions and our activities. Please. Madam Muradova, please.
Çok teşekkür ederim.
I'd like to thank
Çok hörmətli cənab prezident,
dear Mr.
hörmətli
President,
həmkarlar, xanımlar və cənablar,
dear colleagues,
əziz qonaqlar.
ladies and gentlemen, distinguished
Mən
guests.
sizi Azərbaycan tərəfi adından, xüsusilə öz adımdan Azərbaycanda, Bakı şəhərində
I would like to greet
bu
all of
gözəl
you
məkanda salamlayıram.
in Baku, the capital of
Azərbaycana xoş
Azerbaijan.
gəlmisiniz deyirəm.
This beautiful venue. I
Biz
would
bu
like
günü
to welcome
çoxdan
all of you who
gözləyirdik
have been
və
waiting for this day for a long
məmnunam ki,
time,
biz
and I'm
artıq
very
bugün
pleased that today
ATƏT Parlament Assambleyasının işinə öz töhfəsini verəcək,
we will
qəbul
contribute to the
edəcəyi
work of
çox ciddi qərarları ilə
OSCE
yadda
Parliamentary
qalacaq
Assembly. I'm
və
sure
ATƏT-in
this
özünün
annual
nüfuzuna,
session
Parlament
will be
Assambleyasının
remembered
özünün
by
rolunun
very important
artırılmasına
decisions, and it
təsir
will
göstərə
also
biləcək bir
impact the
qərarlar
role of
verəcəyik
OSCE,
burada.
PA,
Və
and its
buna
role in
şərait
the world
yaratmaqdan çox
by our
böyük
decisions.
məmnuniyyət hissi duyuruq və
We are very
Azərbaycan olaraq
pleased to be
ATƏT
hosting
dəyərlərinin
this
ATƏT
meeting.
regionunda, o cümlədən
And
Cənubi
Azərbaycan-
Qafqazda
and as
özünə
Azərbaycan
möhkəm
would
yer
like-
tutmasına verdiyimiz töhfədən qürur duyuruq.
We are proud of the
Mən
contribution
sizin
to the
fəaliyyətiniz
work and
haqqında
role
çıxışınızı
of
dinlədim
OSCE
və çox
and
diqqətlə
its
dinlədim.
values. I
Bugünə
listened with
qədər də il
attention to
ərzində
your
sizin
report.
fəaliyyətinizi çox ciddi müşahidə etmişdim
I've been
və
observing your
sizə
activities
verilən
throughout this
suallara
year,
cavablarınızdan da
and from the
aydın olur
responses
ki,
to
bir
the
il
questions
ərzində
asked to you,
siz ATƏT
it's
Parlament
clear that
Assambleyasına sədrliyinizdə
during
çox ciddi
your
məqamları
presidency
qabartmısınız
of the
və
Parliamentary Assembly, you really
ATƏT-in rolunun,
dealt with
Parlament
very
Assambleyasının
important
rolunun
issues.
artırılması və
And you
ATƏT institutları
worked
arasında
tirelessly to increase the
münasibətlərin
profile and the
normallaşması
role of
və
Parliamentary
ATƏT-in bir
Assembly of
təşkilat
OSCE
kimi öz
and
rolunu
improving
bütün
the
regionda
cooperation
artırılması
between
istiqamətində
OSCE
çox
family
ciddi
bodies.
başlanğıclara start vermisiniz.
And
Mən
you
buna görə sizə
you
təşəkkür edirəm
initiated very
və
important
inanıram ki,
initiative in this regard. I would like to really
bugünkü
thank you for that.
çıxışınızdan sonra da
And
sizə
I'm sure
verilən
that-
suallarda qaldırılan məsələlər
that
ATƏT Parlament Assambleyasının qarşıdakı fəaliyyəti dövründə gündəliyinə daxil ediləcəkdir.
That
Mənim
all
bir
other issues that are going to
sual
be
maraqlandırır.
will be
Bütün
included in the
istiqamətlər
agenda
üzrə
of the future OSCE
Parlament
activities.
Assambleyası prezidentinin
I would
xüsusi
like to ask you a
nümayəndələri var
specific
və onların
question.
fəaliyyətləri
There are
barədə biz
special
burada
representatives of the
vaxtaşırı hesabatlar
OSCE Parliamentary
dinləyirik.
Assembly
Amma
President
Cənubi Qafqaz üzrə xüsusi nümayəndə
But
Cənab Suarişi bizim hamımız çox
Mr.
yaxşı
Suarish,
tanıyırıq.
Special Representative of South
ATƏT
Caucasus,
üçün
we
çox
all
dəyərli bir
know very
insan,
well. It's
ATƏT
very
regionu
important
üçün
for a
çox dəyərli
person for
bir
OSCE.
parlamentaridir
It's very
və
important
Cənubi Qafqazı
parliamentarian
xüsusi
for
bildiyini
OSCE
söyləməyə ehtiyac yoxdur və problemə
no
də çox
need
yaxşı bələddir.
to say that he knows
Siz
the
bilirsiniz
South
ki,
Caucasus region very
ATƏT-in
well.
hökumət
As you
strukturunda,
know,
prezidentlər arasında bu
that
münaqişə,
OSCE
vaxtaşırı münaqişə barədə müzakirələr keçirilir, hesabatlar verilir
Discussing
və
conflicts in the South Caucasus
prezidentlərin
quite
görüşünə
regularly,
hazırlıqlar
we hear
gedir.
reports
Bir növ
and there are
ATƏT
preparations
və
for
Minsk
the
qrupu
meetings of the
həmsədrləri
president.
çox fəal görünürlər, nəticəsi
So
olmasa
the
belə.
OSCE
Amma düşünürəm
and the
Parlament
Minsk
Assambleyası
group co-chairs look very
bu
active,
fəaliyyətin
although there is no
içərisində biraz
concrete
zəif
result.
görünür və
But OSCE
məni belə bir
PA
sual
looks a bit
maraqlandırır.
weak in this regard. So my
sizin
question is,
xüsü nümayəndənizin
your special
konkret
representative-
halda cənab Suarişin mandatının və səlahiyyətlərinin artırılması
Do you
istiqamətində
think about
düşünürsünüzmü?
increasing
Və
the
mən
mandate
özlüyündə
and
hesab edirəm ki, buna
competence of the
ehtiyac
special
var
representative, Mr.
və
Suarez?
əgər
There is
o
a need for
yalnız
that, I
bölgələrə
believe,
2 ildən bir, 3
because
ildən bir
if
səfərlərdən
he
başqa
goes
hansısa
to the region
görüşlərin
only like
təşkil
once
edilməsi,
or
hansısa
twice in
müzakirələrin
2 or 3 years,
qurulması
maybe
və ümumi
initiations of certain
fəaliyyət
discussions,
içərisində ona uyğun adekvat fəaliyyət sərgiləməsi üçün tədbirlər təşkil
to
etmək
ensure his
mandatını ona
adequate
vermək olmazmı? Və
work, maybe
bu
you should
istiqamətdə siz nə
extend his
düşünürsünüz?
mandate.
Yəni
What do you think
onun
about
fəaliyyəti Parlament Assambleyasını bir xüsusi nümayəndə olaraq qane edirmi? Və
his work as a special
bugünkü
representative on this issues, is it
Ukrayna
satisfactory
barədə
to the OSCE
qərar
EPA?
müzakirə edəcək,
Today
qətnaməni
we are
müzakirə
going to
edəcək və
discuss
bugünkü
the
durumda
resolution on
belə bir
Ukraine.
məsələlərin aktuallıq kəsb etdiyi bir halda necə
this point
düşünürsünüz?
of
Xüsusi
view,
nümayəndənin fəaliyyətini genişləndirməyə
Don't
ehtiyac
you think
varmı?
maybe there is a
Teşekkür
need to
ederim
extend the
dikkatinize.
mandate and the competence of the special representative of South Caucasus? Thank you for your attention.
We would like to do it. We would like to do it. That's one of the key reasons, all those visits to try to, as you mentioned, to improve our profile, our role, our capacities, and to make stronger pressure on executives to support us. I mentioned that I sent letters to all presidents of the parliaments to give better logistic for our special representatives, for our vice presidents, for our members of bureau, for all of you during your election observation missions. And I hope so now, especially new occasions, that it's much bigger interest. After all those visits, it's much bigger interest to support all those activities, including activities of special representative, and like this one, like one of the pillars of this organization, former president, very active, former president João Soares, and in very, very sensitive area like South Caucasus. Unfortunately, we need more and more people to work on that. I hope so that in Geneva we'll open that issue again about protracted conflicts and to try to manage with that now in new occasions. João, using the source of his parliament all the time, using his big authority in his country, but we have to back him on additional way to continue to try to find extra budgetary for those activities, and generally to show what we have done in Ukraine in one momentum, to make us more effective parliamentary diplomacy on the key addresses with our collective efforts. João or nor the other special president could not do it alone. And I believe that we're making a bigger teams for that, stronger support, political and logistic, to face on with that, because it has to be a priority for our work. It has to be a priority of our work. I didn't mention, but it's important too. We try to improve our political capacities, and now we have consultations among the former presidents and present president to try to get more political experiences, efforts in those type of activities, to try to keep historic memory and historic knowledge of this organization. João is one of the former presidents, and together we'll continue to work with South Caucasus, with one of the best guys among us. It's signed that it is our priority. He was special coordinator for elections in Georgia, and it was his additional effort to help in this region. Please. Rosa, please. Rosa Knazarova.
Здравствуйте. Я благодарю организаторов за прекрасные организации. Я думаю, что очень успешно и конструктивно будет работа, очень бурная, и мы придем к консолидации всех наших усилий и стабилизации всего мира. Я бы хотела сказать, что за прошлый год экономическим измерением, как вы знаете, было очень много мероприятий проведено, и мы приняли во всех и представили парламентской ассамблее, проведенных во всех мероприятиях и в Швейцарии, и в Вене, и в других странах. И хотела бы сказать, в предстоящих семинарах и мероприятиях будут ли включены второе измерение?
There will be events of the second dimension included. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa, for your work in your committees. Committees are most active part of our work during the sessions, and very important for all activities generally. I'm very grateful for your activities of you and the other chairman, vice chairmen, reporters, and I'm glad to hear that you'll continue to work that on right way. Probably I missed the key substance of your question, but we'll continue to work through our committees and to try, as I mentioned, this cooperation with the executives, with the executive committees, what we have done in Vienna to make additional impetus for our resolutions in follow-up, implementations of our resolution. It has to be the main aim of us, to get more life in our resolutions and more implementation in our resolutions. If you don't have the other questions, thanks a lot for the support. As I mentioned, it is collective effort. I'm just the screen of our collective efforts, nothing else. And thanks a lot for all your time, your devotion, and your readiness to sacrifice your time for the PA and activities of Parliamentary Assembly of OSCE. Now we are going to the third topic. Third topic is financial questions report of the treasuries of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, Mr. Roberto Battelli. He is celebrating 20 years in organization. Please, Roberto.
A little bit more. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. Distinguished members of the Standing Committee, I would like to start by warmly thanking the Parliament of Azerbaijan and the head of the delegation, Mrs. Muradova, for the support provided to our Assembly by hosting this annual session. Thank you very much. And we, of course, look forward to a productive work. My sincere gratitude goes also to those member parliaments that have hosted and will host Assembly meetings and events in the future. As you have mentioned in numerous occasions, Mr. President, we need to support the support of our parliaments to ensure the continuity of our work by hosting our meetings. The Assembly functions, I can say, in an extremely cost-effective way, sometimes even too much, but we need the solidarity of national delegations to ensure that the Assembly can continue its program of activities and meetings. I was very pleased to report to you in our last meeting in Vienna that our finances are in very good order. I was also satisfied that the Assembly received once again a very positive assessment from our outside independent professional auditor. Regarding the national contributions for the current year, I am very thankful to all of you. As you can see in my report, we have received almost 100% of our annual budget. I would also like to take this opportunity to warmly thank our Vice President Doris Barnett, I don't see her, and the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs for granting the Assembly an extra budgetary contribution to assist our election observation mission to Ukraine last May. This was a modest but very precious contribution of just 14,000 euros, but it enabled us to finance the deployment of a staff member in Kiev for a longer time. So thank you very, very much. Mr. President, attached to my report, you will find my proposal for the Assembly's budget for the next financial year. This proposal was unanimously supported by the Bureau at its last meeting held in Copenhagen. I also circulated this proposal to all of you several weeks ago to give you sufficient time to consider it. And I must say that in this period I did not receive any comments or questions from members about the proposal. In fact, I propose to leave the budget almost as it is, with no significant increases, just a minor adjustment of 1.1% related to an increase in 25,000 euros in our election observation allotment and 9,000 euros in our general administrative expenses. This is to reflect the increase in number of election observation missions organized by us, but salaries and staff expenses, travel, annual session and other meetings, publicity and other categories will remain frozen. In conclusion, dear colleagues, we have ensured that our budget complies with and reflects the efforts of our national legislatures to minimize expenses and remain within our objectives of austerity and accountability in the use of our taxpayers' money. And I'm sure, or I hope that you will agree with me that given our level of activity, this is quite a low budget. I therefore hope that you will support this proposal. And I wish to conclude by thanking our Secretariat, Secretary General Spencer Oliver in particular, and Gustavo Palleres for the good work they do managing our finances. Thank you very much. Of course, we are open for questions and suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roberto, for your hard work and readiness to try to find additional money.
Mr. President, this is our colleague from Canada.
Yeah. Please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Je
President.
voudrais féliciter
Mr. President,
Monsieur Battellini.
I would like to congratulate Mr.
Nous
Batelli.
apercevons aujourd'hui que nous n'avons plus
We
de
have
comptes à recevoir.
today that we
Et
no longer
nous sommes des parlementaires et
have
pour nous assurer que la
accounts
démocratie
we need to
fonctionne
expect.
bien,
But we as
c'est que les comptes doivent
parliamentarians
être
wish to
bien
make
payés.
sure
Et
that
le fait que
democracy
vous avez fait
operates
cet effort-là
smoothly
facilite sans
would
doute
also
et justifie
have to
avec
look
vos
at those
nouvelles
accounts,
interventions
but this
la petite augmentation
justifies,
que vous
a
proposez.
slight
Merci.
increase that you are proposing. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more question or comment.
Oh, Doris, please, the floor is yours. Vice President Doris Barrett.
Vielen Dank, Herr
Thank you
Präsident
so
und
much,
Herr
Mr.
Schatzmeister.
President. I also
Ich glaube,
thank
unsere Organisation
the Treasurer,
wirtschaftet
of course.
wirklich
I
sehr
really
vernünftig
think
und
that
sehr
our
sparsam.
organization,
Dafür
works
auch einmal
well
mein ganz
in a most
herzliches
economical
Dankeschön
fashion
und
with the money
dafür,
we
was
have
wir mit
available.
diesem
Thank you very
bescheidenen
much
Budget
indeed.
alles erreichen,
And with this very restricted
machen wir
budget, we do
großartige
so
Arbeit.
much.
Der
We
Präsident hat uns ja
really
vorgestellt,
perform
was
excellent
er
work.
alles noch zu tun beabsichtigt. Das ist wichtig, wenn wir als Parlamentarier in der Tat eine größere Rolle zukünftig spielen wollen. Und wir haben uns ja vorgenommen, in verschiedenen Konflikten auch endlich mal unsere Kapazitäten zu zeigen, was wir in der Vermittlung tun können. Da brauchen wir allerdings die notwendigen Mittel. Von nichts kommt nichts. Wir müssen alle wirklich unsere Anstrengungen zusammennehmen und dafür Sorge tragen, dass wir bei den Budgetverhandlungen Verhandlungen in unseren Ländern die Organisation besser ausstatten. Wenn die Organisation OSCE besser ausgestattet ist, bekommen auch wir als Parlamentarier unseren fairen Anteil, einen größeren Anteil und können besser agieren. Wir hatten jetzt in der gerade abgelaufenen Woche in Deutschland die Budgetverhandlungen für das Budget 2014. Auch da habe ich im Parlament darauf hingewiesen, dass ich erwarte, dass wir zukünftig mehr Geld bekommen und habe unseren Außenminister aufgefordert, mit seinen Kollegen dafür Sorge zu tragen, dass wir uns darauf verständigen, die Organisation auch finanziell dazu in die Lage zu versetzen, das alles, was wir uns vorgenommen haben, auch zu ermöglichen. Aber wir wissen, in Deutschland gibt es ein Sprichwort, das heißt, ohne Moos nichts los. Und das heißt, so viel wie ohne Geld geht halt nichts oder ist nichts zu machen. Deswegen die große Bitte, wo Sie können, sorgen Sie auch bei sich zu Hause dafür, dass wir die notwendige finanzielle Unterstützung haben, damit wir hier nicht nur proklamieren, was wir alles tun möchten, sondern dass wir es auch tun. Dankeschön.
Such that we not only announce what we do, but we actually implement. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Doris, especially for your support and extra budgetary money for Ukrainian elections, and Roberto mentioned. And I will that he stimulated the others to behave on the same way. Kent, yeah?
Yes.
Please, Kent, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say that I fully support what Doris just said, but I think it's very important that in order to be able to generate more funds from respective governments, it's very important that we also increase the visibility of the OSCE in respective countries. And we in my parliament have had an ongoing discussion on how this is possible to increase that. And I think, and I'm sure it takes place in very different ways in every country. But at least in my country, we have had a discussion of the importance of having a special debate or reporting in the parliament, in the sessions, in the national parliaments. So it doesn't just come as a report or something like that, but this is the opportunity to actually have an in-depth discussion about the OSCE PA's work. And I think it's important that this takes place, because in the next after that, followed up by asking for funding from the government, I think it is very important that those two things happens. So I think without the increased visibility in respective countries, a good debate in national parliaments is very essential in order to get the increased funds. And as the President knows, and I've told you before, I am very much in favor of supporting increased funds, because I see that the increased pressure on the staff that we have, and the increased demands on the assistance and help of OSCE PA, we need to work collectively to increase that funds. I think also, I mean, I wish we wouldn't have this occasion, but now, given the opportunity by the increased visibility because of the OSCE's role in Ukraine, I think we have a golden opportunity to increase the awareness overall about OSCE PA's work. So I think this is the moment to make that push for more funds. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kent. Vice President Henry, please.
Oui, Monsieur le Président, merci de me donner la parole. Je voudrais, comme mes collègues, saluer l'excellent travail réalisé par notre collègue Roberto Battelli, avec une gestion très rigoureuse de notre budget. Et cela s'impose d'autant plus dans les circonstances difficiles que nous traversons avec la crise économique qui secoue nos différents pays. Je suis donc très heureux de voir que grâce à Roberto et à toute l'équipe de l'OSCE et grâce au staff et au travail qui a été fait, les cotisations sont rentrées pratiquement à 100%, ce qui nous permet de disposer d'un certain nombre de moyens. Et il est vrai que le renforcement de l'action de l'OSCE tel qu'elle s'est traduite au cours des derniers mois, et en particulier le renforcement que nous souhaitons tous de l'Assemblée parlementaire, de son rôle dans la diplomatie parlementaire qui est très important, il nous faut des moyens. Et donc, dans une période où les crédits sont pratiquement gelés dans tous nos gouvernements, pour trouver des moyens, il y a peut-être une solution. Car lorsque nous regardons le montant des contributions de l'OSCE qui sont annexées au rapport de Roberto, nous constatons qu'il y a une grande disparité. Certes, j'ai pris note dans le rapport du trésorier que la décision a été prise de maintenir le barème des cotisations pour 2013-2015. Mais il n'est peut-être pas trop tard pour engager une réflexion lorsqu'on constate à la lecture du barème qu'il y a des écarts entre les cotisations des pays qui peut-être se justifiaient à un certain moment, mais qui aujourd'hui, en fonction des capacités des uns et des autres, ne prend pas en compte la réalité, sans vouloir faire de discrimination ou de stigmatisation de qui que ce soit. On constate qu'entre les participations les plus élevées, qui sont de 344 540 € pour les USA, et qui sont par exemple pour la France, la Grande-Bretagne et quelques autres pays de 280 000 et quelques euros, et que d'autres cotisations pour d'autres pays sont de l'ordre de 1 498 €, il nous paraît qu'il y a une disparité étonnante et que certaines cotisations sont quand même à un niveau homéopathique qui permettrait de prévoir une revalorisation et un traitement un peu plus fort qui nous permettrait effectivement de disposer de davantage de ressources. Sans vouloir dire qu'il faut augmenter considérablement, mais un petit effort des barèmes les plus bas ferait qu'on disposerait de moyens qui, je crois, seraient les bienvenus si on veut que l'Assemblée parlementaire et que les parlementaires jouent tout leur rôle au niveau international. Merci, car comme le disait Doris, on ne peut rien faire sans rien. Mais il faut répartir équitablement les efforts, et répartir équitablement les efforts, c'est tenir compte bien sûr des populations, mais aussi des moyens financiers et des produits intérieurs bruts des différents pays. Merci.
Thank you very much, Alain. Do we have anybody else? No. Roberto, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Well, about the contributions, unfortunately, it is the governmental side that decides. And we just follow that. And so in order to change it, we can only give as the Assembly a recommendation to the executive part to change these scales. And you know the fight that it is around the scales every year for approving the OSCE budget. Or we can put pressure individually, let's say so, delegation by delegation to our own governments in order to force them to put the question inside the Permanent Council and other bodies of the executive. Anyway, we can, or we can decide not to follow them and to create our own scales, which this is a solution that, according to my opinion, will very hardly eventually pass through the Standing Committee. There will be no consensus, I'm afraid, about that. But of course, I fully agree with what you said and with what also Doris said. But for the moment, I don't see a solution, a quick solution. Thank you, Alain.
Thank you very much, Roberto. We are very modest. Just all our activities and your support to the OSCE are on the level of the few staffers in embassies all around the world. And when you compare the expenditures for the parliamentarians, for the traditional diplomacy, just for the staffers in embassies, it's incomparable. It's incomparable. I have done it in my country when somebody asked how much money Parliament is spending. And I made cooperation. All my activities, like President of Parliamentary Assembly of OSCE, are cheaper than one staffer in the key embassies in the world. Not ambassador, nor deputy, just staffer. And we have to use that argumentation. And we are much more effective, with much more legitimacy than the staffers in the embassies for the diplomacy. And that's the way how to make cooperation, comparative analysis in our parliaments. Just to give you the good sign, and to support initiative of Doris Barnett, I saved some money in our parliament, small parliament of Montenegro. As you know, we have been a host of Ottoman meeting in last October, but close to the support of Bundestag and Montenegrin parliament to support election observation missions, because it is our first line of activities, especially now to support the stabilization in Ukraine, on the possible new elections, after new constitution, new activities, and Montenegrin parliament gives some kind of the support close to the Bundestag support to the Ukrainian elections, just to give the sign that we could save the money and we could find the money for those type of activities. Roberto, I'll inform you unofficially for that extra budgetary money in this budget for the next year, for election observation missions. Now, do we have consensus about budget? Yes. Thanks a lot. We adopted the budget for the financial year 1st October 2014 to 30 September 2015. Thanks a lot, dear colleagues. And now we are going. Now we are going on the report by the Secretary General. I would like to give the floor to the Secretary General, Spencer. Spencer, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I have a written report, which I think has been translated into several languages and is on the tables outside, so I won't read the detailed report. I also would note that on the tables outside is a compilation of all of the news from Copenhagen edition since last year, which I think once a week gives you a pretty good idea of what we're doing, particularly what the staff in Copenhagen is doing and the activities of our leadership. I want to thank you for approving the budget and to thank Roberto Battelli for his service as our treasurer. He has been a great example for other parliamentary assemblies and other parliaments, and has very carefully, along with our outside independent auditors, done a great job at keeping us on track. I'm proud of the fact that for over 20 years we have been within budget, and I think there are very few other organizations that can say that in recent years. And I also want to point out that our budget is much, much, much smaller than any other international parliamentary assembly. So it's a great achievement, Roberto, and thank you, and thank Gustavo Pierres, who's the Deputy Secretary General for Finance, who keeps a very close eye on all of our expenditures. Talking about the meetings and the meetings that have been held and the meetings that need to be held in the future. We thank you, Mrs. Maradova, for your initiative and for your hospitality. You've done a great job here. I know that our organizational team has been here now 4 times over the past year and a half to try to help organize and to design the facilities for these meetings. We now have a problem, though, in that we do not have very many parliaments coming forward to host the annual session in future years. For the first time next year, Finland will host the annual session, and they are the first country who will host 2 annual sessions. Some countries have hosted no annual sessions. We have at the moment no host for 2016. Someone needs to come forward, because we can't really function without some parliaments meeting their obligations to host annual sessions. So of course, it is an expensive undertaking, and it It takes a lot of work, but it is, the heart of our work is our annual sessions. It's where we pass resolutions, where we elect our officers. So I hope that those parliaments that have not yet hosted an annual session will think about this and will come forward so that the future can be clear for the Assembly in terms of its annual sessions. In my report, I did not mention, but it was the question about cooperation with other parliaments was asked. I want you to know that last year I initiated meetings with the Secretary Generals of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly and the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. I invited them to Copenhagen, and we spent a day talking about how we could cooperate, how we could benefit with consultations, how we could save money, how we could organize our meetings in a way that they didn't conflict. As a result of that, we have now made this a regular occurrence. The Secretary General of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe has hosted me, and the Secretary General of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly in Strasbourg. The Secretary General of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly hosted us in Brussels, and we were joined at the request of the EP by the Secretary General of the European Parliament. It's the first time that all the Secretary Generals have come together. So we make this a regular event, and it's something that I think helps all of us in organizing our meetings, and also in providing information that is very valuable to each other, particularly in terms of finance and research. So it's very valuable. It also enhances our cooperation in the field of election observation. So I'm very proud of that achievement, and I think it's something that serves us well. On Helsinki Plus 40, there are some things that I think need to be clarified. First of all, the idea of Helsinki Plus 40 and what to do about it has been kicking around in the OSCE now for the last 3 or 4 years. People were trying to figure out what can we do to celebrate this event, to take note of what has been done by the OSCE and the OSCE over the years. So I reached out to Ilkka Kanerva about trying to get not only the annual session in this 40th anniversary year, but also to hold it in Finlandia Hall, where all the heads of state and government came together and signed this. And we decided also to organize with some think tanks some kind of evaluations where you can have assessments and discussions leading to some kind of recommendations for the future. So thanks to the Helsinki Commission, which reached out to the German Marshall Fund, they agreed to host one of the seminars. Semyon Zakayev and Maria Cheparina, who are Russian members of our staff, reached out to the Russian International Affairs Council, and Ilkka Kanerva and I went to Moscow and met with Mr. Ivanov, the former foreign minister, who agreed with the Russian International Affairs Council to be a partner. Our former president, Göran Lindmarker, was chairman of CIPRI in Stockholm. I reached out to him, and he also agreed to do this. We have added, as the fourth component of this, the Foreign Affairs Council in Helsinki. So the idea would be that these think tanks would host these meetings. We're not hosting the meetings. It's the think tanks that are hosting the meetings. It's not on our budget. It is on their budgets. And they are designing the size and the participation in these events when they take place. And there will be academics, there will be journalists, there will be former diplomats who have participated in the Helsinki process from the very beginning. One of the experts who's had a paper commissioned by the German Marshall Fund is our former president, Javier Ruperis, who was actually, as a diplomat, one of the negotiators of the Helsinki Final Act, who has written a very interesting paper. These papers, by the experts commissioned by the think tanks, will be the main discussion papers for these events. They will take place. They want them to be, and each think tank designs their own all of the various modalities. They want them to be small. They said, we want to have journalists who have covered the Helsinki Final Act. We want to have diplomats who participated in the negotiation of the Helsinki Final Act and all of these things in between, who can evaluate what we've done, what we did in the early years, what we did up to the Charter of Paris, what the Charter of Paris meant and what happened subsequently, and then have some ideas about what the future of the OSCE can be. We did this 10 years ago in Washington. We had a colloquium with the Swiss, jointly with the Swiss International Affairs Council, headed by Eduard Brunner, a very famous Swiss diplomat who was a real genius of the whole Helsinki process. And we brought together mainly governmental side people, former chairman in office, former head of ODIHR, former ambassadors to Vienna, former ambassadors to the Helsinki process, and brought together, and we had two parliamentarians there, Steny Hoyer and Alcee Hastings. And we came up with a very good report. I think it's an excellent report. Even to this day, it's an excellent report. But when the report was completed and sent to our delegations, the governmental side in Vienna refused to even allow it to be distributed among the delegations, refused to put it on the agenda, refused to discuss it in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Because in that report and in those recommendations, which was mainly by diplomats, they called for more accountability. It called for more participation of the Parliamentary Assembly. It called for the Parliamentary Assembly to elect the Secretary General of the OSCE in the same way the Council of Europe does it. It called for the Parliamentary Assembly to approve the budget. They did not want such heresy even mentioned. Even to this day, we have not been able to get the Permanent Council or the Secretary General in Vienna to acknowledge this report or to even discuss it. So hopefully this time, with the support of prominent think tanks and the leadership of the Assembly, we will be able to get their attention. Now the idea is, I know Lord Bonus asked this question, the idea is that the think tanks at present can always change because it's really up to them, and we're sort of the junior partners in this. Although we initiated the idea, we are sort of the junior partners in this process. The idea is that in each stage there will be rapporteurs, there will be papers commissioned by the think tanks for discussion. There will be rapporteurs who will summarize the discussion, forward that on to the next seminar, and then to the next seminar, and finally in Helsinki to have a final colloquium where we'll try to bring together as many of the participants as we can for the final recommendations, which will then come to the annual session, to the Standing Committee and to the annual session in Helsinki next year. Hopefully we can pull this off. There is no budget for this. There is no budget for this. This is being funded by the think tanks themselves on site. I was in Washington 2 weeks ago to try to raise additional funds for the German Marshall Fund in the United States to be able to carry out this project because they have a bad budget deficit. So I'm confident that we will be able to do this. It's a good idea. Maria Cheperna, who is coordinating this on our staff, is a brilliant young woman. And when the Helsinki Plus 40 in Vienna held an ambassadorial retreat 4 weeks ago, our people were spread so thin, I think that Ambassador Notella was in Berlin with the president, and Roberto Montella was in Ukraine, and someone else was somewhere else. So they invited her to come. So she was there at the ambassadorial level and was one of the stars of the show. They even made her one of the rapporteurs because the material that we had been developing and the program that we had been developing was really the best program that anybody is developing on Helsinki Plus 40, far superior to anything that the governmental side is doing. So we hope that this is going to be carried out in a very smooth and effective way. And I think that if we want to expand the participation, we're going to have to get the think tanks to put up more money so that they can provide for language interpretation, because at the moment they're only willing to do it in English, except for the Russians, who are willing to do it in English and Russian, and they will provide and pay for the interpreter. So these are the problems we're dealing with, and the hopes that we have that this will be a successful project, and the Parliamentary Assembly, in collaboration with these think tanks, will make a great contribution to the future of the OSCE and to put some new ideas on the table. On election observation, as you know, and in my report I note all of those parliamentarians who have taken the lead in the election observations during the past year. It takes a lot of time and expense, because usually the people who are going to lead an election observation mission pay 1 or 2 preliminary visits to the site, to the country, before. I mean, this is our way of doing long-term observation, not only through research of our research team and preparing briefing books, but also that the leaders of the delegations go in advance to the countries and meet with all of the key people and take an assessment of the situation, which certainly was done in Ukraine. And I thank again Doris Barnett for her initiative to gain an extra budgetary contribution from the German Foreign Ministry. That's the first time that's happened. I think that's a good precedent, and I hope it might happen in the future. We put one of our key staff people into, I want to be frank with you, we put one of our key staff people into the offices in Ukraine of ODIHR 6 weeks in advance of the election, in order to coordinate the visits, the pre-visits of Mr. Suarez and Mr. Kanerva and Mr. Varidis, and President Krivokapic and others. The ODIHR, although we had tried to make peace with ODIHR months ago, treated her as an alien. They put her on a separate floor. They would not allow her access to the main floor of the ODIHR office. They wouldn't even give her credentials at first, so that they treated her as though she was some kind of an interloper. And it was unfortunate. She did a great job in putting together this election observation mission. You know, we had large teams in Odessa and in Lviv and in Kharkiv, and even the day before the election, we had a team in the afternoon before the election in Donetsk, where even the OSCE long-term monitors were told to stay in their apartments, and there was no activity. But Mr. Suarez felt very, very strongly that we needed to be in Donetsk, that we needed to show the flag in Donetsk, that we needed to show people that this election was going to take place, it was going to be successful, and we were going to have people in the toughest place to be and encourage people to vote. So Mr. Suarez and Mr. Saratelli and Mr. Kanerva and a Canadian parliamentarian and I arranged to go to Donetsk in arrangements that were made through the chairman of the Central Election Commission and the foreign minister, so that we went on a corporate jet from one of the Ukrainian oligarchs who owned one of the big companies who allowed us. It was the only way we could get there, and it was a very successful event. The long-term observer, one of the long-term observers in Donetsk, who had been there for 2 months, who had been told to stay in his apartment, had to get permission when I called him. He had to get permission from the ODIHR to even speak to us. We're in Donetsk, and he had to call and get permission. And he came and briefed us. I mean, with the New York Times was there, the German head of the special monitoring mission was there. They were extremely pleased to see us. They thought that we made a great contribution to trying to encourage people to get out and vote. Of course, there was no voting in Donetsk city on election day, but because of what we've done, there was election observation in 77 voting places in the western part of Donetsk and in the northern part of Donetsk. We were all over, and talk about visibility, we were all over. This visit to Donetsk was all over television in Ukraine for the next 10 hours. with all of these. I mean, Mr. Saratelli was being interviewed in Russian, so they understood exactly what was being said. But it was a great coup. So what happened? The next day, one of our officers who had been with us received a call from his capital that the editor of his newspaper had received a report that a prominent parliamentarian was seen cavorting with a notorious oligarch who was paying the expenses of that parliamentarian in Ukraine. And wasn't that a terrible thing? It was a shock. I asked, and another phone call came from the Kiev Post with the same smear. I asked that all of the calls then be referred to me, because if somebody was going to get hit, it was going to be me, because I'm not a parliamentarian. I arranged this. Finally, the editor of the newspaper called me. I was in Dnipropetrovsk, and asked me this question. And I said, first of all, I don't respond to anonymous allegations. Who told you this? Oh, I can't reveal my resources, he said. And I said, well, I'll give you a very simple answer. The answer is it's not true, and the answer is no. So then he continued to ask questions, and I said, I told you I'm not going to respond to anonymous allegations. So he said, all right, I'll tell you who it was. It was Beata Domrovolovich, the director of elections for ODIHR, who called and told me this. I don't know how you would feel if you were a parliamentarian and somebody from the ODIHR staff called one of your newspapers in your hometown when you were in Ukraine observing elections and being told that you were doing something terrible. So although I called Mr. Lenarčič after the elections in Azerbaijan, which were a debacle for us, Tina Schoen, who left after that experience, did a heroic job in Azerbaijan. And what we did was we held the OSCE together. We brought the ODIHR and Parliamentary Assembly together in line. The other two parliamentary assemblies who were there split apart with a completely different statement. After that experience, I called Mr. Lenarčič and had a long talk with him and said, we need to work together. Azerbaijan has showed that we must work together in order to strengthen the election observation profile and effectiveness of the OSCE. And he said, I agree with you. So we agreed to bury the hatchet, to say nothing but good things about each other. And we did. You may recall when I praised Mr. Lenarčič and the ODIHR at the winter session. And things went very well, very smoothly, until Ukraine. And I don't know why this happened, but it was a terrible, diversion from what we had tried to do. The new director of ODIHR, who takes office on Monday, has already contacted us. He is a former member of this assembly, a former German parliamentarian who's coming to Copenhagen within 2 weeks, and we've agreed to meet. And our teams will meet together in September in either Warsaw or Copenhagen or Vienna, so that we can, from the very start of the new leadership in Warsaw, to work together for election observation. Because, as the President said, that is one of the signature works of this assembly. It is one of the things that we do best, because you, as elected politicians, when you go into an election observation, you have the credibility of your experience as elected politicians. You know about elections. You can tell when something's wrong. And you have the visibility, because one of the things that we find, and we found for a long time, is that when we have parliamentarians in the field in an election observation, there's no OSCE press, but there's German press, and there's French press, and there's American press. And when those journalists, they want someone from their country to give their opinion, so that their producer back home will put that person on the evening news or on the television. This is what gives visibility to the OSCE, not just to the Parliamentary Assembly, but to the OSCE. So it's very important. And I want to thank very much those parliamentarians who have taken the time to lead these election observations and to be in the field so much in the previous month, because it has been a very, very important contribution to the success of this organization. And I want to thank my staff. I have the best staff in the world. I mean, Deputy Secretary General Gustavo Piatas is far more responsible for keeping that budget in line than I am. Semyon Zakayev is one of the most experienced people in the whole OSCE. And Andreas Notella, as our ambassador in Vienna, fights for our positions all the time, for transparency and accountability in the OSCE and for the voice of the Parliamentary Assembly to be heard. And sometimes it's a very lonely place to be, because the Secretary General of the OSCE does not want there to be more transparency and accountability. So we are there doing the best we can for the positions that you've taken. The positions that we take as your staff are based on your positions, on the resolutions you pass, on the orders that you give us when you vote on these resolutions and on these budgets. So I want to thank you again for your help and your support, and we look forward to having a great few days here in Azerbaijan. And now the staff's always at work. Please remind the disabling of the Wi-Fi and mobile phones communication in the Grand Ballroom from 2 o'clock to 3:30 p.m. While the President of Azerbaijan is here, your mobile phones will not work in this room. So once again, thank you, Semyon, for doing the hard work of administration. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Spencer. Do we have any questions? Isabel Pozzuelo and Lord Bones after that. Isabel, please.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Muchas gracias, secretario general, por el informe que nos has presentado. Quería referirme, en primer lugar, agradecer a nuestros anfitriones, en nombre de nuestra delegación y el mío propio como vicepresidenta de la Asamblea, a nuestros anfitriones, la delegación de Azerbaiyán, la acogida y la buena organización que está demostrando en esta asamblea anual, parlamentaria. Es muy importante estar aquí en estos momentos, unos momentos de grandes dificultades en toda la región del Este, y estoy convencida que los debates que vamos a tener aquí, ya hemos iniciado con ellos, van a ser muy interesantes y van a marcar la opinión que cada uno de nosotros tengamos que llevar luego a nuestros parlamentos para hacer más visible la importancia que están teniendo estos países emergentes, toda la región del Este, en estos momentos, en el Este y en Europa y en el conjunto de la organización internacional. Muy brevemente también me quisiera referir a las elecciones en Ucrania que ha incorporado Spencer Oliver en su informe, para resaltar únicamente la importancia que han tenido, la trascendencia que han tenido para el propio país, para Ucrania y para el resto de la comunidad internacional. Eran condiciones y momentos muy difíciles, de muchísima dificultad, pero los parlamentarios de la Asamblea y del conjunto de los países que hemos participado activamente en esa observación electoral, hemos demostrado cuando en un país de nuestra propia comunidad, de nuestra propia Asamblea parlamentaria, hay dificultades, hay situaciones complejas, difíciles, somos capaces de ser solidarios con todo y participar activamente con un despliegue tan importante como el que hicimos en Ucrania para que ese proceso electoral estuviera conocido, analizado, evaluado y validado por toda la Asamblea Parlamentaria. Los resultados creo que fueron excelentes y marcaron un punto de inflexión en el proceso de reordenación y de evolución de la crisis en Ucrania. Sin duda, el hecho de la estabilidad que ha supuesto para el país y para toda la región los buenos resultados de las elecciones en Ucrania han sido un punto a partir del cual se empieza a recuperar la pacificación y la unificación de ese país. Espero sinceramente que todos los debates que tengamos durante esta jornada aquí en Bakú sirvan para afianzar ese camino de estabilidad y de solución de la crisis ucraniana con el esfuerzo y colaboración de todas las delegaciones de esta Asamblea Parlamentaria. Muchas gracias, señor Secretario General.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General.
Thank you, Isabel. Lord Bones.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and can I thank the Secretary-General for his report. I'm sure that we will have all noted the continuing difficulties about election observation, but part of the title of this session is Helsinki plus 40, and I do think, with great respect, we mustn't spend too much time looking back over past difficulties. Even if they are still current, I'm sure that we can live with that. Can I go back to the 4 seminars that were referred to? And again, I thank the Secretary-General and the staff for the arrangements that have been made to enable these to take place without cost to the Assembly. And I will make it abundantly clear that I'm not seeking a general member's participation involved in the seminars, certainly not for myself. But I am actually very concerned to see in the Secretary-General's report that the discussion papers and articles will be synthesized in a final report and presented at the 2015 annual session. This seems to me to suggest that we as a parliamentary assembly will be asked to endorse something which the vast majority of people will not have seen until they arrive in Helsinki or very shortly before, and will not have the opportunity of discussing it or maybe amending it. The whole question of Helsinki plus 40 is, to say the least, opaque. I have tried in our own United Kingdom Parliament to get answers as to what anybody hopes to achieve by this, and it is not at all clear to me, apart from the warm words issued by various people in various positions in Dublin when it was launched, that anybody knows what they are trying to achieve. But what I am quite clear about is that it will be very unsatisfactory if we are presented, in effect, with something that we don't have adequate time to discuss, adequate time maybe to amend, adequate time to have discussed with our own governments as to whether or not it is practical. Because we have to face the fact that we're talking about Helsinki plus 40 for OSCE, not just the Parliamentary Assembly. And if we are going to achieve something, it has to be something which we believe is practical and acceptable to our governments. We're fooling ourselves if we think that in this Assembly that has no executive control over OSCE itself, we can make the changes unilaterally. So I hope that either you, Mr. President, or the Secretary-General can assure me that when we get to Helsinki, and hopefully before, there will have an opportunity for some sort of deliberation rather than some rush of the lemmings over the cliff to announce and support a previously prepared paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Bones. Secretary General.
Thank you, Lord Bonas. I have no idea what will come out of these discussions. This is a very small, modest effort by the Parliamentary Assembly to participate in the celebration of Helsinki plus 40, something initiated by the governments, not by us, but I think it's a good idea and I think it's important. Nobody is going to present to the annual session in Helsinki something with any authority of the Assembly. We have resolutions put forward here. You'll be debating in a few minutes probably a supplemental item that's very wide, that's very sweeping. But the people who wrote it didn't consult with everybody. They put this idea forward. So the idea, and I hope that what will happen, is that after each one of these seminars, something will come out of it about what they discussed. There will not be voting of any kind. There will simply be rapporteurs saying, this is what was discussed, these are the papers that were presented, this is what the general gist of the conversation. So it will flow like that, I think, through the three initial seminars, and then a discussion will be held in Helsinki. Maybe everybody will participate in that discussion in Helsinki, but that's going to be up to the think tanks who are funding and sponsoring and hosting these meetings, and hopefully out of these discussions will come some new ideas and some enthusiasm and some recognition of the value of the OSCE. But nobody's going to put on the table a resolution that has any authority of any kind other than the fact that these people all got together and thought these were good ideas, which you ought to consider.
Thank you. Alain Henry, please.
Oui, Monsieur le Président, j'ai écouté avec beaucoup d'attention notre collègue britannique et je dois dire que je partage entièrement, totalement, ce qu'il vient de dire et que, à travers ses propos, comme je pense à travers mon intervention précédente, se pose la conception que l'on a les uns et les autres du fonctionnement d'une assemblée parlementaire. J'ai la faiblesse de croire qu'une assemblée parlementaire, le rôle prioritaire est tenu par les parlementaires. Et si nous, parlementaires, nous ne défendons pas le rôle prééminent des parlementaires, qui le fera? Au moment où, à travers nos pays, nous voyons fleurir et monter le populisme et un certain antiparlementarisme, je crois qu'il nous appartient de défendre le rôle prééminent des parlementaires dans une vie publique de démocratie et de respect des droits de l'homme et des citoyens, qui est aussi la vocation première de l'OSCE. C'est pourquoi je partage totalement ce qu'a dit notre collègue britannique et que je m'interroge sur la non-réponse ou sur les réponses évasives concernant la participation des vice-présidents aux séminaires qui sont prévus, et en particulier en commençant par celui de Moscou. Donc très clairement, il faut que les choses soient dites entre nous. Est-ce qu'il y aura ou non participation des vice-présidents au séminaire prévu à Moscou, pardon, des parlementaires au séminaire prévu à Moscou et après à Helsinki et ailleurs? Voilà, la question est claire. Je crois qu'il faut qu'entre nous, l'Assemblée parlementaire de l'OSCE soit clairement informée. C'est ça aussi la transparence.
Thank you, Alan. Do we have another questions?
You want me to respond?
Okay, just to see, do we have more? No, thanks, Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Neri. As I said, this was a small initiative. Mr. Suarez is the chairman of the Helsinki Plus 40 project. Mr. Canerva is the vice chairman. Mr. Francois Xavier Di Danea, who unfortunately did not seek re-election to the Belgian parliament, is the other vice chairman. They are the ones who guide this and who make the decisions as to what we do and when we do it. I hope that it can be as broad participation as possible. But as I said, the seminars are designed and hosted by the think tanks. If you don't want us to do that, then we don't have to do it. But we just thought this was a very good way to try to bring in the academic and diplomatic and community to try to evaluate what's happened in the Helsinki Final Act and what is going on now with the Helsinki Final Act and what the future might be. So it's a modest proposal, and I think that it will bring some credit to the Assembly because we're participating in it. So I hope that everyone who wants to participate will be able to participate. But that will not really depend on me or on the Assembly. It will depend on the people who are hosting these seminars. Thank you.
We don't have additional questions? I just would like to repeat, because I have the basic responsibility in consultations with the chairman and vice chairmen of the seminars. I repeat the consultations. I appointed them. I believe that we have to do it, and we could do it, to get real exchange of opinion, to have, don't have ex cathedra view, to have internal views during discussion, to get synergy of discussion, and to have real representatives, politically elected president and vice president of this assembly. This has to be the main aim of discussion on the seminars. It was my idea when I initiated this idea, and I'll do my best to do it. I promised that on Bureau, and I'll do it. General Marshall Fund agree. It's matter just of technical things, bigger space in US Congress Hall. I know that they have a lot of halls in US Congress to have a seminar, and we have to do it. It's only one way to get added value, to have exchange of opinions, to have discussion, to have people who devoted their lives to the Parliamentary Assembly, and people who are evaluating us, like objective friends and thinkers. And I believe that has to be a way to use those seminars to affirmate or create ideas of Parliamentary Assembly and OSCE general like our family. And I believe that we could do it together with Joao and the others. I believe that we could achieve that. Leaders of PA will be there. The other people who are working on our resolutions, probably, because it has to be the real work and real outcome of those seminars. Thanks to Spencer, we are working very hard, Maria and the others on that. I know how it's hard to manage all those issues if you don't have own source of the money, but I believe we have to do it, and I will continue to work with that as I promised in my report. Now more focus on that, to do it in Moscow, and after that in the Washington, D.C., Stockholm, and after all in the Helsinki. Okay, let's go on to topic 5, ratification of the membership of the general committees. In accordance with paragraph 2 of the rule 36 of the rules of the procedure, membership of the general committees shall be ratified by the standing committee or the bureau. All delegations have been reminded of the request of the standing committee that the distribution of members between the 3 general committees should be as equal as possible. The Secretary General has indicated to me that these rules have been observed and that the Secretariat has distributed voting cards for the 3 committees in accordance with as equal a division as possible to comply with this. This membership of the general committees agreed. Thanks a lot. We are going on the 5th supplementary item. In accordance with the Rule 21, now we focus, of the Rules of Procedure, the agenda of the annual session may be supplemented by an item or a motion on any other matter. Within the competence of the OSCE, which does not relate to directly to subject proposed by general reporters to the 3 committees. The International Secretariat has received a total 181 valid amendments to the draft resolution and supplementary items. You already have received a list of draft resolutions and their respective number of amendments, as well as the supplementary items and the number of amendments to each of them. So you have some idea of the potential workload which the Assembly and its committee face. 14 supplementary items have been submitted in accordance with Rules 21 of the Rules of Procedure, new Rules of Procedure of our Assembly. It is for the Standing Committee to decide by the 2/3 majority of the vote is cast whether to place a supplementary item on the agenda of the Assembly. We would like to avoid a large number of unnecessary votes. I shall therefore ask for the approval of the Standing Committee to put all proposed supplementary items, listing documents you have received on the agenda of the annual session. If there is opposition to any supplementary item, being put on the agenda. Please, Mr. Pushko.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I understand it right, we are opposed to supplementary item number 2. We think that this project of resolution is not really corresponding to the present political situation around Ukraine. It's rather time for negotiations. It's time for an agreed solution of the crisis. This resolution is definitely a confrontational one. So we suggest to put it off and to remove it from the agenda of this session. Thank you.
Thank you. Azerbaijan, please. Muradov.
Teşekkür ederim Cənab
Thank you very
Sədr.
much, Mr. President.
Mən hesab edirəm ki,
I believe that
daimi komitənin gündəlinə kifayət qədər ciddi məsələlər daxil edilib
there are quite
və
important
biz
issues on
bunların
the
hər biri ilə
agenda
bağlı
of
öz
the
mövqeyimizi
committee,
bildirəcəyik.
and we are going to speak on each of them.
Amma Ukrayna ətrafındakı münaqişələrin bizim hamımızı daha ciddi narahat etdiyini heç kəs inkar edə bilməz. Çünki bu məsələ bizə daha yaxın olduğu üçün biz bu proseslərin hansı yerdə olduğunu daha yaxşı anlayır və daha ağır nəticələr verə biləcəyini düşünürük. Ona görə də bizim özəl yanaşmamız vardır bu məsələyə. Mən Amerikalı parlamentari cənab Cardinə təşəkkür edirəm ki, Helsinki yekun aktının prinsiplərinin ciddi şəkildə qorunması istiqamətində öz mövqeyini ortaya qoyub və qətnamənin dili çox sərt, tonu çox ciddidir və biz Azərbaycan olaraq 22 ildir ki, ərazimiz işğal altında olan, 1 milyondan artıq qaçqını olan və Dağlıq Qarabağ məsələsinin məhz Helsinki yekun aktının prinsipləri əsasında həllini gözləyən bir ölkə olaraq bu tonda bir qətnamənin qəbulunu çoxdan gözləyirik. Amma çox təəssüf ki, yaranmış bu şansdan, mən hesab edirəm ki, doğrudan da indi elə bir şans yaranmışdır ki, ATƏT regionundakı mövcud konfliktləri aradan qaldırmaq üçün və bu cür konfliktlərin, yeni yaranacaq konfliktlərin qarşısını almaq üçün çox ciddi addımlar atmaq olar və səyləri birləşdirməklə bugünkü əhval-ruhiyyəni, bugünkü atmosferi və Helsinki yekun aktının prinsiplərinin bundan sonra da vacib olub-olmayacağını müəyyənləşdirmək üçün mən bu sözü xüsusilə vurğulayıram. Çünki bugün beynəlxalq hüquq prinsipləri öz depressiya dövrünü yaşayır və bizim hər birimizin ölkələr olaraq və beynəlxalq ictimaiyyət olaraq qəbul etdiyimiz bu prinsiplərin yaşamaq haqqı tanınmır demək olar ki, və belə bir şəraitdə biz qüvvələri birləşdirərək ATƏT regionundakı bütün konfliktlərə tətbiq edilə biləcək və belə problemlərin aradan qaldırılması üçün çox ciddi bir mövqeyimizi ortaya qoya biləcək bir qətnamə qəbul edə bilərdik. Əlbəttə ki, cənab Cardin çox yaxşı işləyib bu sənədin üzərində, söylədim və mənim həmkarlarım da mənimlə birlikdə bu qətnamənin hər bəndinə dəstək verərlər o halda ki, bu ATƏT regionundakı bütün konfliktlərə tətbiq ediləydi. Və biz belə selektiv yanaşmanın tərəfdarı deyilik. Biz illərlə ATƏT-in bütün tədbirlərində, bütün beynəlxalq təşkilatlarda beynəlxalq hüququn prinsiplərinin pozulduğunu diqqətə çatdırmağa çalışmışıq. Qəbul ediləcəksən edilən sənədlərdə ərazi bütövlüyü, ölkələrin suverenliyi, sərhədlərinin toxunulmamazlığı prinsipinin bütün 10 prinsip içərisində vacib yer tutduğunu və ölkələrdəki o cümlədən regiondakı durumun məhz bu prinsiplərin pozulub-pozulmaması ilə bağlı olduğunu diqqətə çatdırmağa çalışmışıq. Amma çox təəssüf ki, bizə dəstək verən az olub. Amma son zamanlar bu məni sevindirir. O mənada ki, artıq həqiqət anlaşılmağa başlayıb və hər kəs ərazi bütövlüyü prinsipinin vacib olduğunu vurğulamaqdadır. Amma hesab edirəm ki, biz ən az 22 il gecikmişik. Və bu illər ərzində biz çox iş görə bilərdik. ATƏT-i, münaqişələri, təhlükələri qabaqcadan hiss edən, onu qabaqlayan və nəticələrini aradan qaldıran bir təşkilatdan çox təəssüf ki, bugün onları yalnız qeydə alan bir təşkilata çevirməzdik. Mən hesab edirəm ki, bu bizim günahımızdır. Mən həmkarlarıma müraciət edərək soruşmaq istəyirəm ki, siz eyni dərəcədə bugünkü məsələyə münasibət bildirdiyiniz kimi, illərlə bizim çağırış etdiyimiz məsələyə də bu şəkildə kəskin mövqe bildirmək istəyirsinizmi? Mən cənab Kardinə sual edirəm ki, bu illər ərzində mən dəfələrlə Amerika Birləşmiş Ştatlarına ATƏT Minsk qrupunun həmsədri kimi çağırışlar etmişəm ki, Amerika öz nüfuzundan, öz imkanlarından, öz təsir gücündən və öz böyük fövqəl dövlət olmaq imkanlarından istifadə etsin və Minsk qrupunun həmsədri kimi bilavasitə öz vəzifə borcunu və bir böyük dövlət kimi mənəvi borcunu yerinə yetirsin. Amma bugünə qədər çox təəssüf ki, biz belə bir sərt, kəskin, açıq mövqe ifadə edən bir sənədin şahidi olmamışıq. Əlbəttə ki, mən Ukraynanın ərazi bütövlüyünün, buradakı böhranın sülh danışıqlar yolu ilə aradan qaldırılmasının tərəfdarıyam. Bu mənim dövlətimin mövqeyidir. Biz bunu bütün səviyyələrdə bildirmişik və bu bizim prinsipial mövqeyimizdir. Təkcə ona görə yox ki, bizim ərazimiz işğal altındadır. Ona görə ki, biz hesab edirik ki, bütün beynəlxalq ictimaiyyət özünün qəbul etdiyi qayda qanunlara hörmətlə yanaşmalıdır. Və bu illər ərzində bu hörmət nümayiş etdirilmədiyi üçün, bu illər ərzində bütün münaqişələrə, ayrı-ayrı ölkələrin maraqları və ayrı-ayrı ölkələrin mövqeləri baxımından yanaşıldığı üçün biz ATƏT olaraq bütöv mövqe ortaya qoya bilməmişik və bugün də belə bir acınacaqlı durumdayıq. Və ona görə də mən təklif edərdim ki, bu sənədi müvəqqəti olaraq mənim həmkarım Kardinə müraciət edərək xahiş edərdim ki, o ya Moldovada, Gürcüstan, Azərbaycan və Ukraynanın mövqelərini burada əks etdirəcək müddaları balanslı şəkildə əksini tapmasına razılıq versin. Hələ bizim zamanımıza var. Biz bu sənədi müzakirə edənə qədər orada bütün bu məsələləri əks etdirə bilərik. Mən elə gəlir ki, şifahi razılaşma yolu ilə də bunu həyata keçirmək olar. Yaxud da biz Helsinki plus 40 səviyyəsində yubiley tədbirinə hazırlaşırıq. Yaxud da ki, o bu sənədi hal-hazırda məhdud məzmunlu bu sənədi, bir tərəfli bu sənədi, ATƏT regionundakı bütün konfliktləri əhatə etməyən bu sənədi geriyə çəkərək onun üzərində işləməyə davam etsin və biz də bu prosesdə onunla birlikdə həm Rusiya tərəfi, həm Ukrayna, həm Moldova, həm Gürcüstan, həm Azərbaycan, həm Ermənistan bu məsələlərlə bağlı öz mövqeyini ifadə etsin və biz yubiley tədbirinə çox gözəl mötəbər bir sənədi hazırlayaq və hesab edirəm ki, bu bizim Helsinki plus 40-a bir töhfəmiz olardı. Və 40 ildən sonra biz Helsinkidə yenidən bəyan edə bilərdik ki, bəli, biz öz yaratdığımız təşkilatın dəyərlərini qiymətləndiririk və öz yaratdığımız təşkilatın prinsiplərinə əməl edirik. Ona görə də mən çox xahiş edərdim həmkarlarımdan, bugün biz bu sənədi geriyə çəkək və bütün konfliktləri əhatə edə biləcək bir hala gətirdikdən sonra onu səs verməyə çıxaraq. Mən onun səs verməyə çıxarmasının əleyhinə çıxış edirəm. Sağ olun.
Thank you, Madam Muradova. Senator Kari is not here, but Senator Wicker is here, and please, the floor is yours, Senator Wicker.
Thank you, and thank you, my colleagues. Yes, Senator Cardin's plane had mechanical difficulties. He will not be here today, but he will be here for the discussion should the resolution be placed on the agenda, which I certainly hope it will. As my colleagues are aware, there is an amendment process. This supplemental item has been before us and available for amendments according to the long-held procedures of the Parliamentary Assembly. Let me say, though, in response to my colleague from Azerbaijan, the fact that we don't discuss every single issue that has come before Helsinki signatories doesn't mean that we should not address this very serious matter where actually the world is watching. And I would say if OSCE PA means anything, if it stands for anything, it should stand for having a full debate of this supplementary item according to the procedures. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is frankly, as we all know, the most flagrant violation of OSCE principles since the signing of the 1975 Helsinki Final Act. It violates not only all 10 of our Helsinki principles, which are outlined in Senator Cardin's supplementary item. It violates the 1994 Budapest Memorandum. It violates the United Nations Charter. And it cries out for a full debate. Now, the issue before us at this moment is clear and simple. Should we allow this to go forward so our parliamentary colleagues here in Baku can consider, debate, amend, and vote on the resolution? I think it should, and I would urge to my colleagues that if we are timid about speaking out on this, I wonder about the visibility of this organization, as was mentioned by one of my colleagues earlier today. If delegates have concerns with the text of the resolution, they have had an opportunity to submit amendments. We've offered our views in a draft. I think it should go forward. This is a serious moment for the Parliamentary Assembly of OSCE, and I think this very serious item needs to go forward for a full debate. Thank you, my colleagues.
Thank you very much, Senator Wicker. Oleg Zarubinsky, on behalf of the Ukrainian delegation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Я специально буду говорить по-русски.
I'm going to speak in Russian on purpose.
Уважаемые коллеги,
Distinguished colleagues,
можно, конечно, спрятать голову в песок,
obviously you can bury
как
your
это
head in
делают
sand,
страусы.
like the ostrich.
Но я думаю, что серьезные международные
But I think
организации
that a serious international organization
не могут быть страусами,
can't allow
когда
itself to become an
ключевые
ostrich
принципы,
when some of the key
во имя
principles,
которых и во имя
in the name of
реализации
which
которых действуют эти международные организации, попираются.
those organizations
Парламентская ассамблея ОБСЕ
are
и сама
trampled underfoot.
Международная организация ОБСЕ базируется и зиждется на известных 10 принципах, хельсинских принципах. И если говорить о международном праве, то не нужно быть очень глубоким юристом для того, чтобы понять, что международное право в ситуации сегодняшней в Украине и вокруг Украины, а я хотел бы особо подчеркнуть, что ситуация не только в Украине, но конфликт есть вокруг Украины. И если мы будем не обращать внимания на прямые директивные нормы международного права, тогда вообще непонятно, для чего существует международная организация. Ведь это не форум для философствований и мудрствований. Это форум для принятия решений. Я согласен с тем, что широкая дискуссия вокруг резолюции американского сенатора должна произойти. Я согласен с тем, что в ходе этой дискуссии, возможно, будут приняты определенные поправки. Но говорить о том, чтобы этой дискуссии не было, говорить о том, чтобы нарушение 10 ключевых хельсинских принципов нами были проигнорированы, ну тогда я не знаю, для чего нам вообще работать. Поэтому, уважаемые коллеги, я хочу поддержать тех своих коллег, которые говорят о том, что эта резолюция должна быть обязательно рассмотрена. Я очень благодарю. Дякую.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zarubinsky. Now, just to finish the first round, and the next one is João Soares. Please, João, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was one of those who signed, under the invitation of Senator Ben Cardin, this resolution. And I think it should be discussed in our plenary session. And I'm sure it's going to be discussed. But nevertheless, I recognize the importance of the arguments that were used by our colleague Bahar Muradova. I feel myself very comfortable in many things that were said by Bahar Muradova. I've been under your leadership, Ranko Krivokapik. I had the pleasure of being in Ukraine as the coordinator of the observers of the elections. I've been there 4 times in the last 5 months during the Council of Ministers when we had the Bureau meeting in Kiev. And I had been there 4 years ago when we observed the presidential elections when Yanukovych was elected. And I remember very well those 2 press conferences that we gave in Kiev after the last elections and the previous elections before. And we have all followed this crisis. This is a very serious crisis in the region, but there is something that is clear for me, and I'm sure it's also clear for Ben Cardin, a man I admire very much because I've seen him standing for the principles of the OSCE and the principles of democratic rule, sometimes even disagreeing with his own government, the previous administration of the United States as far as torture or Iraq war was concerned. That's why I admire him so much. But there is something that is clear for me. We cannot use the model, the old model of the Cold War to the conflicts that we are having in the OSCE area. And so I also understand why our Russian colleagues, that I respect very much, stand for a different position. Of course, we all lost the time for making the amendments because every one of us could have made the amendments in the sense of what Bahar Muradova said very correctly. We cannot use double standards, and sometimes we tend to use double standards here in our organization. And to be faithful to the principles of Helsinki of these 40 years, it's not to use double standards and to have the comprehension and the inclusive approach that give us a peaceful and dialogue solution to every conflict in our area. And I agree with Bahar Muradova, I say it once again, that probably the conflicts in the South Caucasus should be also touched by a resolution in the same sense, like we have seen also in one of the first errors that was made in the Balkans with another conflict, and I'm thinking about the Kosovo, and many of you know what I think about it. There we made one of our first errors as using a double standards to approaching a very serious conflict. We have to discuss this resolution, and I think the discussion will be a very profitable discussion for all of us who belong and who believe strongly in our organization and in the principles of Helsinki Final Act. The OSCE is the perfect table for discussing this kind of problems. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Joao. The next one is Mr. Campagna from Italy.
Grazie signor Presidente. Ho l'impressione che noi stiamo anticipando in sede di Standing Committee una discussione che dobbiamo affrontare non tanto sotto il profilo del metodo quanto nel merito. Io credo che era facilmente prevedibile che il tema dei principi generali dell'OSCE e le vicende dell'Ucraina si sovrapponessero. Da questo punto di vista il supplementary item del collega americano ha finito poi nel metodo dei nostri lavori con l'evocare un supplementary item ugualmente importante, che è quello di un collega finlandese sulla mediazione dei principi e del territorio dell'OSCE. Allora, da questo punto di vista, senza anticipare stamattina la discussione e consentendo al collega americano di partecipare pienamente alla nostra discussione, io credo che abbia ragione l'amico Presidente Soares nel suggerirci di abbinare questi supplementary item di tipo così generale ed importante nel dibattito generale che potrà svolgersi fra 2 giorni e nel quale auspico anche io, come l'amico della delegazione russa, che certe impostazioni meramente polemiche, forse in parte unilaterali, come quelle della mozione americana, possano trovare nella discussione e nel confronto una migliore formulazione, appunto magari appoggiandosi anche su questo altro supplementary item di tipo particolare che è quello di un collega finlandese. Però anticipare adesso, stamattina, in questa occasione, la discussione mi sembrerebbe una mancanza di rispetto sia dell'argomento più che legittimo del collega russo, sia del faticoso percorso aereo che il collega americano sta facendo per venire qui. Quindi accoglierei l'invito di João Soares a inserire questi punti nella discussione generale, cercando di non isolare la mozione del collega americano, ma di recuperare anche dei supplementary item di tipo generale, come mi sembra che sia certamente il progetto del deputato finlandese. Grazie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campagna. Next one is Madame Puzuela. Isabel, please, the floor is yours.
Gracias, presidente. Bueno, yo considero, sin entrar en el fondo de la cuestión, porque no es el momento, pero considero que es imprescindible que tengamos este debate, que se ha presentado esta propuesta de resolución a iniciativa de la delegación norteamericana. El tema central, naturalmente, el tema central de los debates de esta Asamblea van a ser, por un lado, el Helsinki más 40, los debates sobre el Helsinki más 40 y la situación en Ucrania. Lo comentábamos anteriormente en el informe del presidente y del secretario general. Yo puedo no estar de acuerdo, y de hecho no lo estoy, en alguna de las terminologías y en algunos de los puntos concretos que presenta la propuesta de resolución, pero para eso está el proceso de enmienda y el proceso de negociación y de diálogo que siempre se han producido en esta Asamblea Parlamentaria al debatir y al aprobar las propuestas de resolución. En este caso en concreto, además, tendremos que afinar mucho y esforzarnos mucho entre todos para que la propuesta de resolución pueda obtener la mayoría del apoyo de esta Asamblea Parlamentaria. Creo que este debe ser el espíritu con el que se aborde el debate y las negociaciones y el diálogo para aprobar finalmente en el plenario esta propuesta. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Next one is George Serratelli. Please, George, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Of course, we fully understand the sensitivity of this issue and fully confident that if it will come to the concrete supplementary item, I consider personally that it's one of the most important items in all our package. As far as Ukraine is concerned, Ukraine matters for all of us, for all the world, and the crisis in Ukraine and what happened in Ukraine, it should be praised adequately. We are politicians. We should make a political judgments and appraisal which is adequate for our parliamentary work. Of course, what my dear colleague Bahar Muratova said, and I like to reiterate that it's a sensitive for all South Caucasus, and it would be maybe better for this document also to put a word or provision about conflicts in South Caucasus, what happened in Karabakh before, for instance, in Moldova, or of course in Georgia, because in one of the provisions of this amendment we can read that Russia violated Helsinki principles, all of them, in 2014. Of course, it's focused on Ukraine, and we understand, but it was a huge violation of that in 2008 with Georgia, and we know that. And Helsinki's principle is also not to divide countries by small and big, so we all have equal rights, and our territorial integrity should be treated properly, and we should respect territorial integrity and borders of our countries. So I think this issue will be discussed also when we have a debate about Ukraine. As I said before, it would be better to add something to that document, but also what Senator Wicker said, it was time to amend this document. Frankly to say, we prepared, and personally I prepared some amendments to the document, putting what Bahar Muratova said, but to have in mind and to consider that it was focused only on Ukraine, and also to have in mind that we have a lot of resolutions before on Nagorno-Karabakh, on the conflicts in the South Caucasus and especially in Georgia, then we changed our mind. But if there will be any possibility to amend this document and put also additional words about conflicts in South Caucasus and others, and once again to reiterate and to say very firmly what Russia did. There is a question, if you ask everybody here, was it violation of Helsinki principles, what happened, for instance, in Georgia, what happened in Ukraine? Yes. It was, nobody can refuse it, maybe only Russian delegation members, that we can understand that. If it's that, if its answer is yes, then we should have to discuss this resolution and to vote for this resolution. That will be fair, and it will be a real good work and good job for the Assembly. So this is my position. I think we have to discuss this document, and as I said, to make judgment at a proper and adequate judgment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. From Canada, Mr. Maltais, please, the floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you,
Président.
Mr. President.
Comme vous le savez tous,
As you
le
all
Canada
know,
a été
Canada
présent tout auprès de l'Ukraine depuis
was very
plusieurs
much
années.
in attendance in the
Il
context
s'est empressé
of
de
the
reconnaître le
Ukrainian
gouvernement ukrainien.
issues and gave
Pour nous, il
recognition
est important
to the
aujourd'hui.
new Ukrainian parliament. For us, it's
Le point
important.
additionnel qu'a présenté
to
mon
consider
collègue des États-Unis,
the item mentioned
à
by
mon
my
avis, est un
US
point central
colleague,
ici.
which is of pivotal
Comme le disait le
significance, in my
représentant de
opinion,
l'Ukraine,
here, as the
si nous nous
representative of
cachons
Ukraine
la tête dans
say,
le
if we
sable,
hide our
nous allons
heads
être
in the
rattrapés par
sand,
les événements.
events will catch up
Et
with us.
lorsqu'on est rattrapé par les
And when
événements,
events catch
il
up
est
with you,
difficile de prendre la
it's
tête de la course.
difficult to run
Ne voulant pas, bien sûr,
first in a race.
dénigrer qu'est-ce qui se fait au
We
niveau
wouldn't wish
de nos
to
amis de
disavow what
l'URSS,
is
de la
being
Fédération de la
done
Russie.
in the Russian
Mais je
Federation by
crois
our
qu'on
friends
est ici
there.
présentement pour
But I
établir
think
un vrai
that at this
dialogue
point in time,
avec
what
les
we
pays
really
concernés.
need is an
Si,
establishment of true
si nous voulons,
dialogue with the
dans
countries
l'avenir,
concerned. If, in the
prévenir
future,
d'autres
we wish to
situations qui s'est
prevent
produite en Ukraine,
other
je pense que
situations from
le tout doit
occurring
être
in
fondé
Ukraine,
sur un dialogue
everything should
intéressant.
build up
Un
on
dialogue
a worthwhile
qui va
dialogue.
respecter, somme toute,
Dialogue
les droits humains.
that would have to comply with
Le
human
Canada
rights without any doubt.
n'est pas un pays
Canada
qui peut s'aventurer dans
is
des
not a
coins du
country
monde
that
où
may
les droits humains
range
ne sont pas respectés.
afar
Et
in
pour nous, c'est
countries of the
primordial.
world where
Et je pense
human
que le
rights are
point
not complied with.
apporté
For us, it's
par mon collègue
fundamental.
américain, mérite fortement d'être discuté. Et ce n'est pas une mise en garde, loin de là, mais c'est une base de la fondation d'une véritable discussion avec les pays concernés pour en arriver à un consensus qui, somme toute, va toucher les individus dans chacun de ces pays-là, en particulier l'Ukraine. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maltese. Next one is from the Netherlands, Mr. Van Kappen. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. What's going on in Ukraine is probably the most serious crisis that hits Europe since the fall of the Soviet Union, since the end of the Cold War. If we are not willing to discuss this item, what are we doing here? We consider this supplementary item, the draft resolution, probably the most critical item on our agenda. We, the delegation of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, fully support the position that this draft resolution should be brought for discussion into the plenary session. If you don't do that, I think we make a big mistake.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van Kappen. Next one is from Lithuania, Vilja. Please, Vilja, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, I can agree that protracted conflicts have been discussed for a long time in our Assembly and with no tangible results. But let's compare the situation within the organization and the situation around Ukraine and in Europe with the sick man, with the patient. What you are doing when you have a heart attack? You immediately visit cardiologist. You don't think about other diseases. You go to the doctor and try to solve yourself, or your family does it for you. The situation around Ukraine can be compared with a heart attack, not only for our region, but for all Helsinki Final Act, all international agreements. It is a heart attack of all security architecture which our world has been built on. And if we are afraid to look into the eyes to each other, to have a direct discussion, we cannot feel ourselves as real politicians. I still believe that we are a security community, we OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. And the time has come to be very open and to talk, especially because Helsinki plus 40 process is taking place, and we are going to commemorate it next year in Helsinki. And don't forget, this week we commemorate 100 years of the beginning of the First World War. You know, all these commemorations are very serious, and let's discuss and express of all our ideas. Maybe we can find common way to the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vilja. The next one is Doris Barnett. Doris, the floor is yours.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident. Es wurde schon vieles Richtige gesagt, deswegen möchte ich das nicht wiederholen. Und selbstverständlich ist es auch unsere Angelegenheit, hier über diesen Zusatzantrag zu reden. Wir können ihn nicht einfach streichen und sagen, wir kümmern uns nicht um das Problem, das geht nicht. Er ist aber gleichzeitig auch eine große Herausforderung, weil es nicht reicht, nur darüber zu reden, sondern es ist dann auch an uns zu sagen, ja, was folgt daraus? Wie können wir zukünftig so etwas verhindern? Der kanadische Kollege ist ja schon bereits darauf eingegangen. Was ist unsere Antwort? Wir als Organisation sollten nämlich gerade die Antworten geben, verhindern, dass solche Konflikte überhaupt erst entstehen. Deswegen denke ich, für mich ist wichtig, jetzt die Russische Föderation einzubinden, noch stärker einzubinden, und nicht auszuschließen. Wir dürfen um alles in der Welt uns selbst nicht aufteilen in die Guten und die weniger Guten, sondern der Dialog muss bei uns im Vordergrund stehen. Und deswegen glaube ich, dass vielleicht auch so das eine oder andere Seminar, was unser Präsident angedacht hat, helfen könnte, genau diesen Weg zu beschreiten. Wir müssen miteinander reden, wir müssen wissen, auch wie andere fühlen. Ich habe manchmal den Eindruck, dass wir vergessen, mal mit der Brille des anderen die Welt zu betrachten, weil dann würden wir vielleicht auch verstehen, warum der eine oder andere handelt, wie er handelt. Deswegen kann ich nur sagen, unsere Organisation muss wieder zu dem zurückkommen, wofür wir eigentlich gegründet wurden, nämlich zum Dialog, zum Verhindern von Missverständnissen. Und deswegen ist die Diskussion über diesen zusätzlichen Antrag ganz, ganz wichtig und ich bin auch froh, dass er eingebracht wurde. Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much, Doris. The next one is Lord Bones.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. May I say that I think it would be misunderstood by the whole of the Assembly if this standing committee were to decide that this resolution should not be discussed. However, I do think, and I would ask, that the presidency consider how the debate on this resolution and the special debate on the situation in Ukraine should be structured from a procedural point of view. It's been suggested that it's too late for amendments. It is, of course, possible for a manuscript or oral amendment to be considered, provided nobody objects to that, and that applies both to the plenary and to committees. So it may well be possible for an amendment or amendments to be agreed between the parties and presented to the plenary with an appeal that they accept discussion of those amendments. But one thing that I think we need to avoid if a parliamentary assembly is to achieve anything at all, and that is just to have a simple debate of everybody voting one way and other people voting the other and add to the confrontation. And this is why I think it's very important that we structure the discussion of this resolution with the general debate so that hopefully something good can come out of it and we don't just have the satisfaction of voting for a particular resolution against one particular member of the Assembly.
Thank you very much, Lord Bones. We have now the Ms. Dobesova from Czech Republic.
Thank you for the word to me. I would like to say something about behalf of the Czech delegation. I think that this topic is very important for all of us. Don't mind or if you live far away from the Ukraine or too close to the borders to the Ukraine countries. So I support to put these supplementary items of this situation, of this crisis on the plenary session because I support this discussion. Because I think that OSCE Parliamentary Assembly has big power to have influence on solution of this situation in the Ukraine. So I would like to support to give this supplementary item on the plenary session discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Dobesova. Now the floor is for our colleague Gege Hamanyan from Armenia. Please, the floor is yours.
Уважаемые коллеги,
Distinguished colleagues,
слушая выступления
listening to the statements
отдельных делегатов, у меня сложилось впечатление, что Хельсинкский заключительный акт состоит не из 10 принципов, применение которых должно быть одновременным и которые имеют равноправную императивную юридическую силу, а состоит всего лишь из одного принципа. Принципа нации на принципа нации на территориальную целостность. А где принцип на самоопределение народа? То же самое и ООН, законодатели Организации Объединенных Наций почему-то поступили крайне, видимо, неправильно, потому что в статье 1, в пункте 2 Устава ООН четко написано о праве народов на самоопределение. Так вот, коллега из России как-то говорит, надо снять с обсуждения этот вопрос по той простой причине, потому что абсолютное есть игнорирование статьи 1, пункта 2 Устава ООН, точно так же, как есть игнорирование одного из основополагающих принципов Хельсинкского заключительного акта о, опять-таки, праве народов на самоопределение. Что касается целесообразности обсуждения проекта по Украине, я скажу, это для всех нас, бывших граждан Советского Союза, а ныне граждан СНГ, очень больной вопрос, потому что трудно разделить армянам украинцев от россиян. Это одна великая цивилизация, имеющая истоки в Киевской Руси. Так вот, обсуждение этого вопроса, а не навредит ли тем положительным подвижкам, которые имеют место быть? Ведь не секрет, что совершенно недавно Совет Федерации Российской Федерации принял исключительно актуальное решение о недопущении ввода российских войск на территорию Украины. Ведь и сейчас продолжаются очень интенсивные переговоры между президентом России, канцлером Федеративной Республики Германии, президентом Франции. Продолжаются переговоры между госсекретарем США Джоном Керри и министром иностранных дел России Сергеем Лавровым. Так вспомним принцип Гиппократа «не навредить». Здесь прозвучала очень опасная мысль о том, что США являются сверхдержавой, и они должны решить Нагорно-Карабахский конфликт. А кто отрицает это? Но в чем опасность этого утверждения? Опасность утверждения в том, что исподволь игнорируется роль Минской группы ОБСЕ. Уж если Нагорно-Карабахский конфликт решает всего лишь одно государство, тогда зачем держать Минскую группу ОБСЕ? Тогда зачем, в принципе, нужно ОБСЕ, если есть мировой судья? Это говорит руководитель делегации, страна которая с исключительным уважением относится к Соединенным Штатам Америки, равно как и к Франции, равно как и к Российской Федерации. И устами нашего президента Сержа Азатовича Сарксяна неоднократно было заявлено, что официальная позиция Армении сводится к тому, что есть основа для заключения мира в конфликте между Нагорно-Карабахской республикой и Азербайджаном. И она основывается на 5 совместных заявлениях президентов России, Франции и США в Латвии, Лос-Кабосе, Мускоке и так далее. Зачем мы изначально сводим на нет 5 лет продолжающиеся кропотливые усилия президентов стран Минской, сопредседателей стран Минской группы ОБСЕ? Кому это выгодно? Но в целом общая тональность обсуждений вселяет оптимизм. Вселяет оптимизм, потому что мы должны выступить с позиции той ответственности, что 39 лет назад лидеры наших государств приняли исключительное по своей историчности глобальное решение о Совете по безопасности и сотрудничеству в Европе. Так что любое это обсуждение мы должны предварять мысли, а как на нас посмотрят через 10 лет наши грядущие поколения. Ведь принятие этой резолюции, оно усугубит военные действия, которые имеют место быть на Украине. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you very much. our time is expired, and sorry. We are close to 12 o'clock, and we have to close the list of the people. Now we have the list: Sweden, for the first time, Albania, and that's it for the first round, and 3 additional for the end, and that's it. You'll get the floor. You get the floor. Okay, to close the first line with Albania and Sweden, I'll give the floor to 3 last speakers. Albania, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm speaking on behalf of the Albanian delegation here. We have signed and supported the resolution because of the importance of the event. I don't think there's anything more important since the existence of the organization than the crisis in Ukraine. So not to discuss it, not to put a resolution forward, I think we're seriously undermining very much the existence of our organization. So to be brief, that's why I'm in favor of that, and I think all will benefit from that. Otherwise, as I said, this would be a serious breach of our commitment to security, peace, and stability in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. We have the consultations, and the next one is Kent.
Yes.
Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I will be very brief. From the Swedish side, I want to say that not all in our delegation have signed this supplementary item yet. The delegation as such think it's very important that this issue will be discussed in the plenary session. We would like to bear in mind exactly what Doris Barnett was saying on Germany, as well as Lord Bones of Britain, that it's very important that this is a constructive debate that leads forward and not adds to the divide, but rather tries to take a constructive approach for the future. We see small signs of improvement in making right now, and I think that the OSCE's Parliamentary Assembly should have a dialogue that leads forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we'll try to conclude. 2 more speakers. And if somebody for Russian delegation, but just if he is the member of the standing committee. Mr. Slisky, you cannot get the floor because you are not a member of the committee. Only Mr. Pushkov could get the floor, if he would like. Yeah, thanks a lot. And now we have 3 last speakers. Madame Bukharova, our special representative Congressman Smith, and Mr. Pushkov. Please, Madame Bukharova, the floor is yours.
Çox təşəkkür edirəm. Mən düşünürəm ki, çox yaxşı elədim ki, bəzi fikirlərimi açıq söylədim və belə bir müzakirə alındı, nəzərdə tutulmamış bir müzakirə və bu məsələnin nə qədər vacib olduğunu nəzərə çatdırdı. Mən çox təşəkkür edirəm qətnamənin müəllifi cənab Kardinə ki, onun üzərində işlənmənin mümkün olduğunu vurğuladı və biz belə bir işi bundan sonra apara bilərik. Və eyni zamanda Ukraynalı həmkarlarıma bildirmək istəyirəm ki, bizim məqsədimiz bu məsələni arxa plana atmaq deyil, bu məsələdən, bu şansdan yararlanaraq ATƏT regionu üçün vacib olan bir sənədin qəbulunda iştirak etməkdir və heç bir şəkildə dəvəquşu misalı burada yerinə düşmür, hərçənd 2 dəfə bu misal səsləndi. Amma mən onu da vurğulamalıyam ki, artıq dəvəquşu başını qumdan çıxarıb, amma gözünün biri açıqdır. Digəri isə yumuludur. Və mən hər 2 gözü açmaq və bütün münaqişələrə baxmağı təklif edirəm. Və eyni zamanda insan xəstəliklərindən söhbət açıldı. Əlbəttə ki, ürək ağrısı insan üçün vacib bir məqamdır və hər kəs onun arasında ciddi düşünür. Amma insanın başqa xəstəlikləri də olur. Məsələn, saç tökülməsi. Mən fikirləşirəm ki, Azərbaycanda 22 il bundan əvvəl baş verən hadisə, Moldovada baş verən, Gürcüstanda baş verən hadisə bəziləri üçün saç tökülməsinə bənzəyir. Saçlar tökülür, amma orqanizm ağrı hiss etmir. Deməli, qarşısını süni yollarla almaq olar. Amma ürək ağrıyanda bəli, həkimə getməlisən. Onda belə çıxır ki, bu münaqişə bəziləri üçün ürək ağrısı, digər münaqişələr saç tökümüdür. Və biz bu yanaşmanın əleyhinəyik, mənim həmkarlarım. Mən çox xahiş edirəm, bu fərqi anlayaq. Ve insan her yerde insandır. Ölkələr ölçüsünə, sərhədlərinin kiçikliyinə, böyüklüyünə baxmayaraq atəş üçün vacibdir. Və biz əgər dəyərlər üzərində çalışırıqsa, bütün münaqişələrə eyni yanaşma sərgiləməliyik, selektiv yanaşma olmamalıdır. Mən bütün mənim fikirlərimi dəstəkləyən həmkarlarıma təşəkkür edirəm və inanıram ki, biz xeyli vaxtımız və imkanımız var ki, bu sənədin üzərində işləyək və bizim hər birimizi qürur hissi ilə mən də bunun qəbulunda iştirak etdim deməyə sövq edən bir sənədi qəbul edək. Onda biz həqiqətən də Cənubi Qafqazda, dünyanın ən ağrılı bir məkanında, ən ciddi problemlər yaşayan bir məkanında digər problemlərin qarşısını almaq üçün çox ciddi bir qərar qəbul etmiş olardıq. Mən təşəkkür edirəm hər birinizə, diqqətinizə görə.
Thank you very much, madam. Now the next one is Congressman Smith, Special Representative. Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And members, by invading Ukraine and seizing Crimea, Russia has violated elemental OSCE principles, including sovereignty, use of force, and territorial integrity. It seems to me that it could easily be construed as a serious dereliction of duty for this Assembly not to express in voice and vote our deep and abiding concerns over these Helsinki violations. Even the United Nations has expressed itself at least 17 times on Ukraine. Finally, let me just say to my colleagues, the crisis in Ukraine is not over, and we all hope that negotiations will bear fruit and lead to a sustainable peace. However, the threat posed by the separatists, buoyed by the military might of Russia, remains very real and very volatile. So with respect, at the very least, the Standing Committee should permit consideration of this important resolution. And I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. And Mr. Pushkov, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will make a few remarks. I think that it is quite true that we have to conduct this debate in a spirit of taking into account all the international principles that are part of the OSCE founding base and also of the United Nations. And therefore, when I hear my American colleagues express their righteous indignation against the so-called Russian invasion, I just wonder whether they forgot how the United States violated all the international principles invading Iraq, for instance. I want to stress there is no Russian invasion in Ukraine. The word invasion is characteristic mostly of the American foreign policy, and it was proved in the last 20 years many times. I would like to support our colleague Mr. Soares, who was the only one to mention Kosovo in all this respect. Weren't the principles of the OSCE violated towards Serbia and in Kosovo when a big part of the territory of a member state of the OSCE was taken away basically with foreign support? Wasn't it a break of territorial integrity? Wasn't there a support for an organization, the Army of Liberation of Kosovo, which at some point was regarded by the same United States as a terrorist organization? And weren't these actions against the Constitution of Serbia at that point? I wonder why all this is forgotten today. Why do we forge a new reality every time we have an international crisis? Aren't these double and triple standards? How can we say that the OSCE should take actions on this event when it didn't take the actions in the conditions which were, even according to the most impartial approach, were apparently the same when the Kosovo crisis happened? Why the OSCE is so adamant about the situation today and not considering any actions and any resolutions on that score? Isn't it because it was the United States that were involved at that point, and now they are in this position of a judge, and they didn't want to be judged at the time when the Kosovo crisis arrived? And I think this is a question which really is very pertinent to our debate today. And therefore, I'm for all the principles, but let us not try to punish Russia for all the sins committed by other governments. Our Georgian colleague says that there was a huge violation towards Georgia, but it wasn't a bombing of a peaceful city, Tshinval, with about 150 people dead as a result of this bombing. You all see those on the television. Wasn't it a violation of certain principles of the OSCE, of the United Nations? That you don't bomb a peaceful population. So let's not simplify. These are very complicated issues. Let's work on the base of united principles and not on principles which apply in certain conditions when we like them to apply and do not apply in the conditions when we don't like them to apply. I would support those here who said that we all consider the principles of the OSCE in their totality. We cannot just pick a principle from here and there because it comes in handy, because it suits our political interests. I think that we should have a wider approach if we really want to build a better world and a better Europe, and not just to go into a new period of confrontation and mutual accusations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pushko. Now, before we voting, I'll try to remind you of a few things. As usually, Lord Bones was the most precise when he explained what's going on. We have 7 amendments, and we have only possibility in our negotiations, mediations, to try to improve the resolution with consensus on the plenary. And that's what Lord Bones reminded us, and could happen in the meantime between this committee and the plenary session. But before that, we have to vote. As I mentioned, I'll put the supplementary item to vote, and if it does not gain the support of third majority of the votes cast, that means not counting abstentions, then the supplementary item will not go to any further. It means that supplementary item needs 2/3 majority of the people who are voting. You have the cards. Clerks remind me that you have to keep your cards in the air while they have been counted.
Not cards, it's there are no cards.
No cards, okay.
The delegation sign.
Just take your name of the state, only one name of the state. We don't have 2 names of the state, and only one could vote on behalf of all delegation. Clerks will count. Please, who is for support of the resolution of Senator Cardin, clear, gross, and uncorrected violation of Helsinki principles by the Russian Federation? Who is for? Who is in favor, sorry? Please, raise your hands. Sorry.
Wait a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 30. Did you get 30? 30. I've got 30. 30?
Please, write me that.
30. Okay. All those against.
Who is against?
1, 2, 3. 3. It's clear. It's clear.
It's okay.
Oh, there's another. But there,
5.
you don't have to give the whole count. Just say the result is clear. The motion goes forward.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks a lot. Abstain are not accounting.
No, abstentions are not.
And I got the result. 4 is 30, 5 is against. It means that this supplement item will be on our plenary session on 1st June. On 1st June. Thanks. And now we have to allocate our supplementary items. Secretaries, just change one small thing. because our colleague Zai Guliev has to be chairperson of the first committee, and we are remove his supplementary item from two to third committee. We agree about it. We can confirm the position of all supplementary items. Okay, thanks a lot. And now we are going on the sixth topic, yeah? Reports and information activities on the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly.
Yes, sir.
We are close.
Point of order.
Yes, please.
Point of order. You, Mr. President, told that, us earlier that Mr. Kovalyov is not here in Baku and is no longer in the Russian delegation. For this reason, and according to the rules of procedure, his supplementary item falls and cannot be discussed at our annual session. Thank you.
Thanks. I got support for Secretariat. He sent official letter that Mr. Pushkov is replacing him, and he took over that position. Mr. Pushkov took over his position. The explanation of the procedural side. It's okay? Okay, we start with the sixth topic. We are late, really. Reports and information activities of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. We got a new director of the audit, Mr. Mikhail Link. He'll take position on Monday. And I have to congratulate on behalf of all of you on his position. And thanks to Jana Zdanacic, who has done a lot with us, especially in last year. And I hope so that we'll continue cooperation to improving with a step forward, sometimes step back, but with vital interest of both of us to cooperate on election observation missions. Now we have to hear, if possible, very short, because the Secretary General and Joao has given a report with a lot of details about Ukraine on election monitoring. From the others, Hungary, Fyrom, Hungary.
That's me.
Hungary.
That's
yes, Adal, please, the floor is yours, but please, be short.
Thank you, Mr. President. On 7th April, on behalf of the OSCE, I announced that the Hungarian elections offered voters a genuine choice in competitive elections. The elections were well administered. However, we noted that the ruling party still enjoyed an undue advantage, including in biased media coverage. The reduction of the seats in the parliament from 386 to 199 enjoyed broad support. In these times of austerity, I think that this was a good decision. That being said, there was criticism that the manner in which new electoral district boundaries were drawn lacked transparency, and there were allegations of gerrymandering. We welcomed some of the legal changes introduced in the legal framework. However, a number of aspects of this legal overhaul undermined checks and balances, such as a reduction of the oversight powers of the Constitutional Court. A few weeks before the elections, I paid a visit to Budapest to hold a series of initial meetings, adding to our main briefings immediately before the election. Together with Baroness Hilton,
who I worked with in leading the mission. We worked quite well with you all year. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Adele, for your leadership in that section. Let's go further. Ms. Mutonen, would you like to give a report?
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, I was appointed by the OSCE chairperson in office, Didier Burkhalter, to act as the OSCE's special coordinator, leading the OSCE short-term election observation mission for the early parliamentary elections in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, which took place on the 27th of April 2014. The observation exercise was a collective undertaking which saw the OSCE observe alongside with the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. All in all, the OSCE family deployed some 30 observers from the Parliamentary Assembly, in addition to the 20 long-term observers and some 300 short-term observers. Our deployment followed an invitation from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to observe the elections. Prior to the elections, we also had the privilege of meeting with the Speaker of Parliament, as well as with the Foreign Minister and representatives of all political parties which participated in the elections. This meeting provided us with a comprehensive overview of the political situation and the interests at stake. Isabel Santos, who led the OSCE PA delegation, and myself worked efficiently with Ambassador Gerd Hinrich Ahrens, who headed the ODIHR team of long-term observers. We were thus able to deploy countrywide during the election day. We found that shortcomings during the campaign overshadowed an otherwise generally well-run election day. The elections were efficiently administered and election day went smoothly. However, the governing party failed to adequately separate its party and state activities, while regrettably the major opposition party announced that it would not recognize the results even before all polling stations had been closed. This prompted Isabel Santos and myself to call with the content, within the context of the press conference on the opposition not to boycott Parliament. Unfortunately, our call proved in vain, as the opposition has refused its parliamentary mandates and to date continues not to contribute to the work in Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mutonen and Isabel, for your works on the elections. We heard about Ukraine 2 times, Joao and the Secretary General. Roberto will do it when he will give a report like Special Representative for South-East Europe. And we'll leave special representatives to give their reports, on the plenary. If Mr. Campani would like to tell somebody about Serbia. Okay. Just a few words.
Grazie, sarò brevissimo. A differenza che nei casi della Macedonia, che sono stati richiamati prima, le elezioni in Serbia hanno avuto uno svolgimento molto soddisfacente e possiamo dire che sono stati quasi conseguiti i migliori standard di democrazia occidentale. Grazie.
Western democratic standards.
Grazie, signore Compagna.
Thank you, Mr.
And we are going on the 7th topic, future OSCE PA meetings. We have privileged at autumn meeting in Geneva, in Switzerland. And we have with us the head of the Swiss delegation, Mr. Abi. Would you like to take the floor? Yes, please.
Ja, genau. Sehr geehrter Herr Präsident, sehr geehrter Herr Generalsekretär, geschätzte Parlamentskolleginnen und Kollegen. Am 13. Februar dieses Jahres habe ich mich in Wien bereits einmal an Sie gewendet, geschätzte Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Im Hinblick auf die kommende Herbsttagung der Parlamentarischen Versammlung der OSZE in Genf. Die Schweiz darf 2014 zum zweiten Mal die OSZE präsidieren. Der Hauptakteur während des Schweizer Vorsitzens spielt selbstverständlich unser Außenminister und Bundespräsident Didier Burkhalter. Ich möchte Sie an dieser Stelle übrigens daran erinnern, dass Herr Burkhalter heute Nachmittag die Plenumssitzung eröffnen wird. Wir, die Mitglieder der Delegation des Schweizer Parlaments, möchten natürlich unseren Teil in diesem Jahr des Schweizer OSZE-Vorsitzes beitragen. Aus diesem Grund stehen wir seit nunmehr 2 Jahren in engem Kontakt mit den Delegationen der Ukraine und Serbiens, um unsere aufeinanderfolgenden Vorsitzjahre gemeinsam zu koordinieren und Schwerpunkte zu definieren. Ein erstes Mal haben wir uns mit den beiden anderen Delegationen 2012 in Monaco getroffen. Erst kürzlich, nämlich Anfang Juni, fand ein weiteres Treffen mit der serbischen Delegation bei uns in Bern statt. Leider konnte die ukrainische Delegation aus aktuellem Anlass an diesem Treffen nicht teilnehmen. Ein erklärtes Ziel der Parlamentarierdelegation der 3 Länder Schweiz, Serbien und Ukraine war es, die OSZE besser in das Blickfeld der Zivilgesellschaft zu rücken. Im Hinblick auf die von uns zu organisierende Herbstversammlung in Genf ist uns die Verankerung der OSZE in der Zivilgesellschaft denn auch ein ganz besonderes Anliegen. Wir denken, dass sich Genf besonders gut anbietet, um die Zivilgesellschaft mit der OSZE und ihrer Tätigkeit besser vertraut zu machen. Die Stadt Genf ist nämlich nicht nur Sitz zahlreicher internationaler Organisationen. Sie beherbergt darüber hinaus eine Vielzahl von Nichtregierungsorganisationen, welche die Anliegen der Zivilgesellschaft vertreten. Es ist mir eine besondere Ehre, Herr Präsident, werte Kolleginnen und Kollegen, Herr Generalsekretär, Sie im Namen des Schweizer Parlaments vom 3. bis 5. Oktober zur Herbstversammlung in Genf einzuladen. Nun hoffe ich, Sie von einer Reise in die Schweiz überzeugt zu haben und möglichst viele von Ihnen im Herbst in Genf begrüßen zu dürfen. Herzlichen Dank für die Aufmerksamkeit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abiy, for your hospitality. Winter meeting will be in Vienna. As usually, Austria is a great host, and we are grateful for this Australian permanent hospitality. Thanks again. And as you heard, the next annual session will be in Helsinki. You don't need the floor. Okay. Let's go to try to conclude because we are now in the. And now I have to encourage the delegation for the next annual assembly. I'll do my best to persuade that. I had the contacts about it. I'm not so scary that we'll not organize the next annual session right place. And I now have the possibility to, before I close our meeting, I repeat, because so many interests about seminars that I'll do on that, and I'll keep my word to organize that together, parliamentarians, experts, NGOs, and all the other think tankers, and let's say, people who has the prominent position related to the OSCE. Thanks to all of you for your hard work, and see you soon. The Standing Committee is closed.